Okay, it's 8 o'clock, and I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to all of you. This is one of the bigger turnouts we've had in recent months, so thank you for coming. So, with that, Peter, if you do the roll call.
Sure. Rickard?
I hear.
Epstein?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Dornbrook here, and O'Grady.
O'Grady here.
Any announcements?
Just the usual announcement. I'd like to welcome everyone to the regular KMPUD board meeting. We're being live fed at KMPUD.com, and if the public who's watching online would like to make a comment or ask a question, they can email me at eChristison, eChristEson, at KMPUD.com.
Very good. I'd like to note that our supervisor from Amador County in our district, Jeff Brown, is here, and I thank you, Jeff, for coming up.
Thank you.
Any comments from the audience? That anything that's not on the agenda? Any corrections to the agenda? Consent calendar?
Yep.
None? We'll move on to number 6, adoption of the consent calendar. That's approve the regular board meeting minutes of February 9th and approve the consent for claims and review the receivable shutoffs report.
Move adoption.
Moved and
I'll second it.
seconded by Standish. All in favor?
I think Nancy had a question.
Oh, Nancy?
You'll notice that KMA is on the secondary AR past due balances, and we have just recently gone to electronic payments, but I just checked with Kelly to find out that, so we didn't want to write checks any longer. Figured we could process our payables more quickly, but I just have learned that Bank of America doesn't. It sends you checks too, so the check is in the mail.
Nice to know that. We had, yes.
On this section of the budget report, the sum is not correct. So you look at there is 2 items in that section, and if you look at the total, it actually does not sum up.
That's because the check's in the mail.
Sorry, I cannot help these numbers.
Good catch.
Okay, we have a motion seconded to adopt the consent calendar. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to number 8, the financial report. Kelly?
Morning.
Excuse me, Kelly, before you start.
Sure.
Nancy?
I'm sorry. I had wanted to compliment Kelly and her staff for providing the detail on the credit cards. It's just, I think it makes a world of difference and answers a lot of questions you don't have to ask, so thank you very much. Sure, no problem.
You're always welcome to favorable comments.
Sure. Take it where I can get it.
Okay, so we'll start with the balance sheet on page 22. The only note I had on the balance sheet for January was the variance in operating cash, and this is due to the timing of the receipt of property tax apportionments from Alpine County. I have been in contact with Alpine County, and they assured me that we should be receiving our payment or our check from them within the next couple of weeks. Apparently they've had some changes at Alpine County, and so things got a little bit delayed because normally we receive that mid-year payment from them in January, right at the end of January. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks we'll have that in. But that's really the only note I had on the balance sheet. It's usually somewhere around $300,000, somewhere in there. I think I have it on the cash flow as $294,000. That's what I'm expecting. But any questions on the balance sheet? Okay, moving on to the combined income statement on page 24. Operating revenues for the month of January were up from plan by $115,000. And year to date, we are up from plan by $383,000, but I do want to take note that that does include the $100,000 worth of property tax allocation for the calendar year for electric.
And the 70,000
And,
payment
right.
from Vail.
And there's a, right,
It'll be
70.
deferred until we can verify the meter, the electric meter, so that was in there as well.
Say that again, please.
We had to verify the electric meter was working properly, and so we notified Vail that we would probably be billing them additional 70, and once we were able to test it under load, and we did bill them that, and so they did pay that this year.
For the pump house, when we did the
Yeah,
testing.
but
on-
is that in?
Yes,
this-
that's
in the-
that's
yeah.
part of
So
it
the
too.
actual overachievement around 210,000 from operations.
Correct.
Yeah.
Total operating year-to-date is up from plan by $301,000. Moving on to the general fund on page 25. You'll notice there is an overage in operations and maintenance, and that includes $3,175 to repairs to the roof in this building. And then also in operating expenses, the overage there includes an additional $3,133 for a vehicle transmission repair that happened. Moving on to fire on page 26. Year-to-date total operating for fire is up from plan by $63,000, and that's again mainly due to the $50,000 that we had budgeted for the fire funding study. And then you'll notice that there is $35,000 in contribution revenues, and this was due to the donation of the ambulance from Alpine County. That's what we valued that piece of equipment at, and it is now being depreciated. We set the depreciation at 7 years for that piece of equipment. Moving on to water on page 28. Operating revenues for water year-to-date are up from plan by $4,400, and year-to-date total operating is up from plan by $24,500, but again, still operating at a loss of $60,000, just not as big of a loss as we had budgeted for. Moving on to wastewater on page 29. Year-to-date operating revenues are up from plan by $41,000. You'll notice this month there was an overage in operations and maintenance, and that includes $1,748 for a solenoid valve and $2,500 for a vibration switch. And then also in contract services, there's an overage there which includes $1,975 for the boundary line adjustment for that parcel that the wastewater treatment plant sits on, and also $2,033 for our annual WDR permit reports. So year-to-date total operating is up from plan by $95,000 in wastewater, but again, still operating at a loss of $128,000.
But that department has historically lost like $500,000 a
A year. Mm-hmm. And we're right on track.
We're making progress.
Moving on to employee housing, I just wanted to note the overage in operations and maintenance there. Again, there was roof repairs that were completed for $3,300 on that building as well. Moving on to electric. Year-to-date total operating for electric is up from plan by $300,000, but again, that $100,000 of that is property tax allocation. Total operating for electric is up from plan by $190,000. No catastrophes in electric so far this year.
And no diesel either.
Yeah, right.
For February, should we be turning positive in electric too?
Yes, I would expect.
What was the question?
Will we be turning positive in the net? A loss of 48,000 this month.
Mhm.
We normally turn positive.
Yep.
This time.
And you'll see when we get to February revenues, they were we had pretty good revenues in February, so. We'll move on then to propane on page 34. Year-to-date revenues are up by $30,000. Year-to-date expenses are up by $30,000. So we're right at plan for propane. I don't know if I could get that any closer. But that's what we expect to see in propane. So that's all I have on income statements, unless there are any questions.
Good performance, it's also good budget. You know what I mean? So build in a buffer.
We try. For the comparisons for the balance sheet, I didn't have any notes on the balance sheet comparatively to last year, not anything that we haven't already talked about. I did have a note on the income statement comparison. You'll note that total operating, we are up from last year by $140,000. But when you come down to non-operating, we're actually less than last year by about $77,000. But that all has to do with the receipt of Cal OES funds.
Last year.
Right. That's why we're, looking better. But total operating is up from last year by $140,000. So, any questions on comparisons? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to February preliminaries. These are actual revenues for February. You can see that we're up by $121,000 for the month of February, and year-to-date up $504,000. So you can tell when it snows. Any questions about February revenues? Okay. We'll move on then to cash flow. Oh, you know what? I didn't note. Sorry. Oh, it's not in there.
Did I?
Yep, that's okay though. It was EBITDA for February. There was a slide, but it's not there. So I can provide that to you guys separately. So moving on then to cash waterfall. We ended February with $2.4 million in operating cash, which is, if you look at it, it seems like we're $731,000 under budget, but that is 100% just due to timing. The bills for February weren't due until March 2nd, so we had, you can see $720,000 worth of February AR that was received in March. So that comes right back to us in March. It just had to do with February being a short month and the due date of the bill not being in February. So $522,000 check from Vail got posted to March. So for March, we're looking to be better than planned by about $203,000, which coincides with February revenues and AR. So we're back on track there. That negative $700,000 is a little scary to look at, but you can see it all comes back. And you'll see that I've also included that $294,000 from Alpine County that I expect to receive, as well as the purchase for the 950, which we have been renting recently, but we've just cut the check for that, and rather than financing it, we discussed it in the Finance Committee meeting that there is no reason to finance it at 5% when we have the cash available to just purchase it outright. So
What's the purchase price?
150.
the total price is $153 with tax. Yeah.
Okay.
So
About 50 came out of reserve, and the remainder 100 came out of operating cash for snow removal.
Right.
and still our low point shows is December of 2020 at $1.4 million. Any questions on cash flow? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to known budget variances. The only addition to this was the addition of the vehicle repairs. We're now up to $5,266 over budget. So we've spent more than that in vehicle repairs, but that's just the amount that's over budget. So that was the only addition to that.
Answers the question.
Oh, sorry.
Is that a trend you see continuing?
What? The vehicle repairs?
The
Yes.
over budget?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
That's okay.
Everything keeps breaking.
Any other questions on financial?
I get you have listing the 5 years operating cash waterfall, and so you are listing the number of loans that the district has. I don't see, and it may be because it's gone, but I'd like to know that. When we got the meter system, we basically had a loan from the company, software or whatever, so that's why we are having to pay for the meter fee. So is that loan retired or paid
Are you
off?
talking about the COP loan?
I don't know.
Yeah, the COP loan is what we use to pay for the new meters.
Okay.
And the COP loan is still on there. It's
Okay.
on there.
I see it. I didn't know the name.
Right.
Thank you.
Very good. We'll move on to 8B, the 2019-20 budget timeline and assumptions.
So we are on track with our timeline that was provided last year. This is the first set of assumptions. In the Finance Committee, we just went over the major changes. There weren't that many changes to the assumptions from this year to last year. So I don't know if you just want me to go over what we had for changes, or if Eric, you want to, you
Yeah, I mean, we can.
you
go-
were really
there
clear
weren't-
on that.
Sure,
So-
there weren't a whole lot until we got to, the biggest is probably when we got to salaries and wages, was our biggest change. So we raised the temporary snow removal rate based on what we'd actually advertised most recently at, and we raised the temporary firefighter up as well. So we've generally seen a 50-cent an hour increase for each season on that. So those are the two biggest ones that came in salaries.
Obviously, this is a working document. We also talked about in the Finance Committee meeting, I had projected the CPI increase at 1%.
Oh, right.
And because the CPI increase has been more than that the past few years, I'm going to change that. We had discussed either to 2 or 2.5%. Personally, I feel like the 2.5% is probably the better number. The past couple of years, it's been over 3, based on the San Francisco average. So I feel better, going with the 2.5. But that was the other big change that we talked about in the Finance Committee meeting. And then there's obviously the operating expenses. There's nothing listed there yet. I just got that information from Brandy after this went out, so those will be included, the specific operating expenses, that big ones that we expect to see for next year.
And one thing we'll note too is historically, the way the capital budget's been done, a lot of operating expenses have been thrown in there and should have been in capital. E.g., we budgeted for roof repairs in capital, and it should have been budgeted in operating expense, and we'll be making those adjustments this year. Staff's already met on the capital first round of it, and then we'll be taking that to operations once we have that all dialed in. But just you'll note a shift this year away from capital and into operating for those type of projects that are not true capital projects. And then we've added the RUS C8 loan in. That's another big change in number 11 on page 52. So the C8 loan has been added in as well.
And we took out the $400,000 loan from the bank, the refinancing, since we haven't done it yet. The boundary line adjustment hasn't been completed. We're not going to take the loan if we don't need it.
Yeah. So once the boundary line adjustment is completed, then we'll talk about it in finance whether we want to pursue that or not. Every December 20th remains our low, but every time we provide a monthly update, that December 20 keeps getting higher to the point where I'm comfortable that we don't need to refinance, but definitely going to run it through the Finance Committee once the boundary line adjustment is complete. and that'll be our next step. And so I've talked to Zach Wood. He anticipates that that's a ministerial action and should be approved shortly.
I know we're facing about $4 million in repairs and renovations for the wastewater treatment plant over the next 4 years or 5 years.
5 years, yeah.
Starting next year, I assume.
No, we need to do the 218 rate assessment to consider all our capital projects for both water and wastewater, and our long-term timeline, and the rates would have to be adjusted relative to that. And that's part of what we've been talking about a little bit in planning.
Yeah. I guess what I'm wondering is, those repairs have to be done no matter what.
That is correct.
Anyway, I'm just wondering are we planning on probably financing that through Russ, hopefully?
So a couple things. One, we need to get the rate structure done in there, and whether that assumes grants, no grants, but assumes loans through Russ as our financing mechanism, and then that's considered in the rate structure, is to be determined. But my anticipation is I will be going for Russ loans on all the wastewater projects. So once I get to the preliminary design phase, then I can start applying for Russ loans.
And do you think if we are successful with the Russ loan for that type of utility, do you think we'll be asked again to meet tier ratios and O-tier ratios and so on in the same way as we have for electric?
No, there's no such thing on that side of the Russ house. And they don't require the PCS software, which is also interesting on that side of the Russ house. So it's nothing like that. And all the times I've done the Russ loans previously on previous projects, there's been nothing close to that. That's not to say things couldn't change, but my experience has not been that.
So I guess this is all related to the Bank of the West thing. So you don't think that we might need to borrow that or some amount of it in order to do initial repairs, the initial stuff on the wastewater treatment plant, so we don't get in trouble while we're waiting for the 218 study and so on?
The only thing that we could do in this next year without basically going to preliminary design is the roof, and that's about 250 was the bids we got, or the one bid we got. I think we could do that with an interfund loan. Just
We also
temporary
do have our
holdover.
line of credit with
Yeah.
Bank of the West.
And we can also, that project can also be rolled back to Russ as a project that was expended for the wastewater plant and part of our loan application as well.
About 6 months ago, it was this. At least I had this feeling of urgency that was kind of like we got to get things done, and now it seems like we're going to follow a logical process which pushes out any sense of urgency, I guess.
So we're going to follow their 5-year step, which the biggest one was the roof. That was in there. So we're still sticking with the 5-year plan, but our rate structure doesn't support all those capital improvements. The rate structure, as Kelly's pointed out, since I've been here, wastewater loses money, and Standish says loses about $500,000 a year. So it's a known issue that wastewater is underfunded, and so that's what the 218 is going to have to look at, and including the $4 million over the next 5 years.
Where did that $4 million
That is killing me.
It was from the study that was completed about 3 months ago.
Yeah.
I think it's 3 point some million.
Yeah,
rounded up to 4
3.8,
million.
right.
So for the next go-round, I would appreciate any comments, suggestions, questions. You can email me so that I can make sure that, everybody's concerns or questions are addressed in the next round of assumptions that will be presented at the next.
The one thing I brought up in the Finance Committee, I'll just repeat it here, and that's, under water where it says budget to increase 34%, that's just the usage rate. The overall increase for water would be about 8%, which is what was agreed upon, 2 or 3 years ago.
Is it useful to have a red line of these assumptions versus the final assumptions last year, or not?
I have it. I just find it very difficult to read. If somebody would like it, I'm happy to provide it. We are tracking all the changes. I find it really difficult to look at. So, but
Well, I
I'm happy
appreciate
to
your
provide it.
comments. I
Sure.
share your frustration.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Kelly. Next, we'll have the performance reporting and aquifer levels. Randy?
I was getting blinded looking at Eric.
Yeah, I could.
I can't. I go down to my screen and it's black. No, it was the snow.
It's the first bluebird day in a long time, and we're closing the blinds.
Good morning.
Good morning.
For performance reporting in February, we had a pretty good month. For electric, we had 954,000 kilowatt hours that we bought off of the grid. Our losses in electric were 78,000 kilowatt hours, which was 8% for the month. And that brings us to 11% for the year, so we're right on track with our 12% goal. And I will note that February, being a short month, we did have slightly lower use in most of our departments than we did in December and January. Propane, we finally saw a turnaround to a positive loss, which we're excited about. 4 million 4 million cubic feet of propane delivered into our bulk tanks. We had 157,000 cubic foot loss for the month, which was 4%. We're still in negative loss territory for the year. But we expect to see that remain around the 0% loss for the year total. Moving on to water, you'll see in your packet that I did correct the November issue that was pointed out at the last board meeting. The true November losses were only 1%, not 19% as was reflected last month. In February, we had another good month, 1.5 million gallons of water produced at our wells, and only 4,000 some odd gallons of loss. So 0% loss for the month in water, 8% loss for the year. And then lastly, we have wastewater. Our influent meter at the plant showed 1.9 million gallons of wastewater treated at our plant. We did have 411,900 gallons of I&I, which we did expect to see some. We had some wet events during the month of February. We saw a 22% unmetered use in wastewater, which brings our year-to-date to 13%, which is still, we're very happy with the year-to-date number. We're going to be watching closely as warmer weather hits and things start melting off to see how our I&I numbers look through the spring.
So this has to do with the next slide as well, but next page as well. But I've always thought that if the I&I starts going up, that our aquifer also goes up. Kind of would make sense.
Right.
But that's not happening.
On the well 4.5.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, are we still using 4.5 more than we were using, or still using 2 less than we were using?
I actually talked to Derek this morning about that, and he did say that yes, we have through the winter used 4.5 more than traditional, but particularly in February, we used well 2 less than we would normally. Well 2 is our only well that we don't have remote access to from the plant, and the amount of snow made it difficult for us to actually access the well house and run well 2 as much as we would normally. So well 4.5 has been run more than usual.
Okay.
But he said we have been resting that the last week, and he's starting to see a rebound on that aquifer.
Okay. Thanks.
And that is all I had for performance reporting, unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Brandy. Moving on to item 8D, potential merger of Eastern Alpine Fire Department and Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department.
Good morning.
Morning.
So as the board is aware, we've had a really good relationship with Eastern Alpine County over the years, and in And the photo here on the board's presentation is an engine that the Eastern Alpine County has loaned us when our engine's been out for repair. We're looking to continue that relationship and possibly explore merging with Eastern Alpine County, which would be beneficial in a lot of different ways. One, it'd give us the top-end administrative skills that Chief Hughes has and all the resources that he brings to Eastern Alpine County by the networking of the Tahoe Regional Chiefs, the availability and the recruits from from the Lake Tahoe Basin Fire Academy, which are very eager to get a certain number of hours to be eligible to be a firefighter one. He currently has 26 people on his roster, volunteers for his fire department, and a majority of those volunteers are coming from the Lake Tahoe Basin Fire Academy. Again, eager people that want to come up and participate and volunteer for fire departments. So we could tap into that resource. We can work with Eastern Alpine County for for joint purchases to purchase new engines, equipment, piggyback on larger orders to get better discounts. And then finally, financially, the district would be able to offset some of these costs that we're currently having to pay for now through property taxes, as you know. By combining the two different departments, we could overall, I think, reduce the financial responsibility for us as well as for Eastern Alpine County through grant writing loans as well as billable calls. But more importantly, being able to put a strike team out for Alpine County, which they currently do now at a very minimum base. But Chief Hughes and I want to follow the Fallen Leaf Fire Department model. And this, if you don't know, Fallen Leaf sends out a strike team, multiple strike teams throughout the summer season, and that offsets their financial responsibilities for the small area of Fallen Leaf. And the return on investment is huge for the department as well as for the firefighter because they get valuable experience out in the field. They do get a paycheck, and they get return firefighters season after season just to participate in that program. And so, again, the positives of merging with Alpine County would be to, one, financially offset some of the losses that we have for our department, find more volunteers, and also possibly provide a better service for the people of this community. The negatives of going to a merger would be the loss of our autonomy. As you know, we are the Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department. We have several fundraising events every year, and people know us and are very excited to support and contribute to our fire department. However, I don't think I would see too much of a loss in that respect. We might lose the logo on the side of the truck, but we'd still be here. We'd still have a chief. We'd still have captains, firefighters that are within the Kirkwood Valley, part of our family, and we would be out there to serve for the community, including maybe increasing our availability for the chipping program. So in a way, even though we might lose our logo, I think we'd actually be able to provide a better service for the community because I have hopefully a wealth of volunteers coming up to Kirkwood and staying here on these key big weekends to help support our operations. The other thing that would be a negative is that Eastern Alpine County, as you know, has given us this wonderful ambulance, and thank you, Terry, who's in the audience, supervisor from Alpine County. We really appreciate the support, but they don't want to get in the medical business. That's not to say that we can't perhaps down the road introduce it, but currently, as you know, I don't have enough EMTs to support the ambulance to actually run it anyway. But perhaps with an additional amount of volunteers from Eastern Alpine County who are EMTs or possibly paramedics, we could reinstate that service. But right now, that would be, again, a second negative. So today I'm just asking the board that we get direction from the board to pursue or continue conversations with Eastern Alpine County to looking into merging our departments. This was reviewed and also approved by Alpine County at the last Board of Supervisors meeting, which was held recently last Tuesday. And I felt that generally all the board members had a positive support in having their staff directed for us to pursue this conversation. With that, I'd open it to the board for any questions.
Yeah, I have a question. How would that affect our relationship with Amador County?
It wouldn't change. We would have to work with Amador as well as Alpine County to create another mutual aid agreement, just basically changing the name on the piece of paper.
Okay, because they do contribute, don't they pay for our workman's comp for the volunteers?
They pay us $72 per fire call between the stop sign to Tragedy Springs. It
Right.
does not include calls within the Kirkwood Valley, as well as about $1,200 to $1,500 a year for workers' comp.
Okay, just wondering.
The other thing associated with the fact that we're in 3 counties is the assessment, 4 cents per square foot per year assessment would stay, and that money would be a revenue contribution from Kirkwood to Eastern Alpine Fire, right?
Correct.
And there would have to be a mechanism by which we continue to collect the money from the Amador County side of things and have that somehow invoiced and a check written, right? Is that the idea?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, to me, the important thing, the two most important things are the level of service doesn't change and if anything improves. And that once discussions get further along, we understand more detail, we look at what it does to the fire department financials. I think that that Eastern Alpine and Alpine County do see advantages of this. The strike team, more reliable training, I think, from their point of view, and so on. So I think they see advantages. But I also think, and I don't know if Terry wants to comment on this, but I also think they would like for the county to provide us with a bit more service for the property taxes that we pay out of Kirkwood. And I think that if the financials reflect that, that would be a positive. But it's important to me that it does. Yeah. So, but that's all subject to the discussions that would take place if we agree that this is a direction that we want to at least explore. And by the way, at the same time, we have the RFP for the fire funding for the special tax. So we're not shutting off that at this point either, because we don't know what these discussions would end up being, and so we're prepared to go either way. But if we could avoid that special tax and still improve the finances significantly in the fire department, and not change the level of service and maybe improve the levels of service, I think that would be positive.
Could you give us a brief overview of Eastern Alpine County Fire Department? In other words, it's based in Woodford, and where does it operate?
Sure. Several years ago, Alpine County had actually two different fire departments. There was the Markleyville Fire Department and the Woodford's Fire Department. They had a real need for training, and they also had 2 chiefs that were really not communicating very well and not cross-training very well. And so, long story short, the county decided to hire Lake Valley Fire Protection District to provide training for the county. And with that came Chief Hughes, who was actually paid by Lake Valley through Alpine County. And Terry Woodruff, please correct me if I've gotten any of this wrong. As that relation developed, they realized that it was better to have one department, so they created Eastern Alpine County, which covers Markleyville, Woodford, basically everything East Slope. They have, again, 2 stations, 3 Type 1 engines, 2 water tenders, and they also have a relationship with the Washoe Colony, WIC, to provide equipment and services if needed for them as well. There's a chief, there's 2 captains, and again, 24 firefighters for their department. And
24 salary?
no, volunteers, but they do give them a small stipend, just like we do as well, to respond to calls. They are like us. They do all services, so they do wildland firefighting, structure firefighting, rescue operations, and they actually sort of adopted the Alpine County Search and Rescue because of low search and rescue volunteers. they're also sort of a leader responding to search and rescue for Alpine County, including winter operations and snowmobile rescues as well. They, as we mentioned before, do not have an ambulance. Everybody is either an EMT or first responder or EMS type trained personnel. And they have a mutual aid agreement that just finished up with Lake Valley Fire Protection District to provide services from Pickett's Junction, Highway 8 in 89, Hope Valley to Kirkwood. And then from that point east, they have an agreement with East Fork or Douglas County Fire Department as well. And that's a summary of their operations.
So I have two questions. The first one may be overly simplistic. What happens to Western Alpine County?
So Western Alpine County is served by Bear Valley Fire.
I see.
And Bear Valley Fire is public safety, so it's law enforcement and fire. So we have the benefit of having our deputies also be firefighters.
Okay.
So that's a requirement.
Do you think of us as east or west?
East.
East, okay.
My other question on medical is, since Barton operates the emergency facilities here, is there any possibility that they could be incentivized to provide ambulance service? Has that been approached, or is it practical?
That's a big question. The clinic, which is paid for by Vail Resorts, is an open contract, and it can be anybody. You know, one time it was Dr. Schwartz, and she created something called Mountaintop Medical. Mm-hmm. Currently, it's the contracts with Barton Medical, and it's a seasonal contract, and it may or may not be here next year, depending on how things go. Barton Medical is, as you know, in South Lake Tahoe, but they run the clinic here. They run the clinic, I think, at Sierra Tahoe and as well as at Heavenly. When they step in, they're able to create something called an interfacility transport for ambulance service. And that interfacility transport comes from the basin, which is not part of the fire department at all. It's El Dorado Medical Services. And so, again, it's another entity, a JPIA, that brings those services in and out of Kirkwood. Now, we have approached them. We have a beginning of the year EMS meeting with all the different ski resorts, the fire departments, as well as El Dorado Medical Services to talk about, you know, what resources can be provided and what layers of resources will come on those big holiday weekends when there's 6 ambulances in the bases and you need 9. And so it's been a challenge to, one, get more resources, more ambulance services out here, but 2, who's going to pay for it? So to create a more bigger ambulance service and or at least have one maintained here with the paramedic is a bigger question and a project that the El Dorado Medical Services would have to be approached, and who's going to, again, pay for it. So we could certainly try to look through Operations Committee, and I could work with the chiefs to see if there's a way, but increasing that level of service and maybe finding another provider, whether it's Amador's service, or in some respects during the death ride they bring a service up from Sacramento. You know, there is a possibility there, but it's not an easy question because there are mutual aid agreements and areas of operations that people can't go in unless it's been approved. I may have answered your question way too much there.
And it's really outside the
scope of
the merger either, too. And it goes to American Legion has a lock on Amador County. You know, what is it? El Dorado EMS has a lock on El Dorado County. So they can't go into each other's jurisdiction, and that's a question beyond the scope of even if Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department. That's a bigger issue.
All right, well, after we build the employee housing, I'll take a look at it.
Ambulance quarters in there.
There you go.
Rick, how does the Eastern Alpine stipend for volunteers compare to ours?
I'm vaguely familiar with it, and it's not structured like ours at all. But if you approve us to look into mergering, we can certainly bring that information back and we can boil it down for you. But I just can't give you the right answer right now.
Nancy?
So
let's see if I can remember all my thoughts here. Being in Amador County, part of Alpine, I'm concerned about that. I think about, we think that there isn't going to be any future increase possibly in the fire fund, but with Alpine County in charge, they can decide what they want to do. In other words, we're talking about, the 4 cents will still be there, but gee, if Alpine said, well, we're not being able to meet the budget or however it works, they'll come back and they're going to say, we want more.
Well, here's my understanding of that,
Okay.
because I have asked that question
Okay.
too, and it's definitely a good question, because we would not be the governing board any longer.
Right.
But my understanding is that if they were to want to increase our assessment to, say, 6 cents, they would have to do that countywide, throughout their jurisdiction. They can't just focus on us, because we'd be part of that whole system. So it would be a 218 process that would have to be approved by the entire population of Alpine County, not Bear Valley, but the part that Eastern Alpine services. So it couldn't just be laid at our feet. And currently, Eastern Alpine Fire is fully, as I understand it, is fully funded by the county revenues, not by assessment. So we'd be unique with our current assessment. But to increase that or change that, my understanding is it would have to apply to everybody in their jurisdiction, which would not be such a simple thing, I don't think. Am I right, Terry?
Right, we would not see. The other question I have is, I think in snow removal, there is an indication that you don't have enough beds for your snow removal people to increase the numbers. So where would you put the people that are coming up here, that you need up here, or expecting to come up here, and possibly get stuck up here? Where are you going to put them? And then the other question I have is, and this probably is more for Terry, is do you have a fire council or something where perhaps a board member, PUD board member, or perhaps some community member, a couple of community members could sit on that council to help bring the voice from Kirkwood down to Eastern Alpine? So those are just my comments.
That's a good point, too. I mean,
Yeah.
it'd be nice
That's a good comment.
There would be a channel of some sort, as you say, so that we would have a voice. I mean, at least it wouldn't. Yes. Otherwise, Terry would have to be at every meeting here.
So fire safe councils are completely separate from the operations for the fire department. They're nonprofit. Not to say that we couldn't have somebody on the fire council. And our vision, Chief Hughes and mine, of a merger would have a chief here at Kirkwood, a battalion chief or assistant chief, whatever you want to call it, that would be the supportive role and also the voice for our department with the county. As for beds, we do have 2 Murphy beds here at the station for the firefighters now, and we could also introduce additional bunk-style housing beds in the small conference room and/or downstairs in the chief's office if we needed it, without having too much hardship. Right now for firefighters, without having future housing considered. And I think our housing might be a little bit better than Woodford Station housing they have right now.
Yeah.
I can give you a tour of that, and ours is much better. We'll just say that.
But it is a good question. And it is, I think, the snow removal, the fire, and I'll have a brief report on something in our planning committee notes, just to give a glimmer of hope
Agreed.
on this matter.
And I got one more comment or question. And maybe all this will come out in the details is, so right now, with the PUD responsible for fire, we all get to see what's happening in that budget. So how do we have an eyes on that versus somebody just saying, don't worry about it, everything's okay, or whatever, that's.
Alpine County puts their budget out within their board meetings, so it's within their minutes, and so they're very transparent like we are with the budget. So I don't see that it'll be a difficult transition at all with seeing the financials for the county.
But it's something that, for example, just logistically, operationally, it could be part of a report from whoever the senior person is up here to this board and to the community.
Yes.
So, right, there could be updates on that specifically reported.
That's a good point, though.
I'm sorry, I just keep thinking of things. Thinking of Cheryl in the back there, who's, leading the summer festival. How, it's, again, the devil is in the details, is so obviously right now we say, oh, well, we want to spend or raise money for this. Well, how do we know what this is going to be so that it can be widely explained to the community? And so, I can already think of down the road how people go, oh, well, that's just going to go for something other than what the money was raised
So
for.
we actually raised that issue with Nicole and Terry and Chief Hughes. That was a big concern of ours. And so multiple suggestions came out of that. Again, devil's in the details. But we would focus on, we would keep the 501c3, and we would focus on that money going to things that definitely stay in the valley, e.g. turnouts for our guys. And we would focus the money to things that were not really capital assets per se, such as a boat or a new engine. We would focus, because that would come out of the property taxes that we're paying through Alpine County. They fund all that through their general fund. We would use it for localized things. We'd have to pick out very localized things that benefit the volunteers up here directly. And so, turnouts, scuba packs if those ever go, things like that we talked about is how we would use that money so everybody knows if you're donating here, it stays here. And there was no pushback at all from the CAO. And she said that's good. It's a better PR for all of us to do that.
Well, moving to board direction then. I'm interested if it improves the quality of service.
And staff believes it will.
Okay.
So staff recommendation, take the next step, is that correct?
Our recommendation is let us start negotiating and getting let us meet the devil and get his details. That's what we want to do. And this is going to be a multiple step process. I mean, I don't know, best case is probably 6 months we get into this, but we need to start negotiating every little nuance out. The structure, how the funding goes, how the amateur side will continue to be covered, but how does that assessment come across? And we talked about that as an invoice from Eastern Alpine, and they would provide coverage to all Amador County and, of course, El Dorado, which they do under a separate contract anyway, so that would be an easy one. So all those details we need to work out, and we just want, it's going to take us a while, and we'll be bringing it back probably, unless there's any contrary direction from the board, I would say we probably bring it back to planning, since planning's kind of been the overarching shield of the ad hoc. I don't know. Eric's been involved in this the most, and I'd like to keep him involved. However, whatever committee that ends up being, or we could keep it with the ad hoc.
We could make him part of the merger.
Well, yeah.
Maybe I don't get a ride home.
Yeah, so Rick just reminded me, and I was going to cover it under general manager, but we do have the RFP ready to go. Eric and Rick and I have completed that. It is ready to go out.
This for the
This is for the special tax consultant, and our target is to get on the March 2020 ballot. So if we're going to let it, my recommendation is we let the RFP get the bids back as we concurrently run a parallel path of talking with Eastern Alpine for merger, and then when we have actual hard numbers on the special tax consultant and updates on where we are, then the board can make a more informed decision of pick one, pick both, or keep them, or pick neither. Nancy had a question.
Yeah, another comment, following up on what Bob just said, that he's in favor of it if it improves service. So as you go through the process, I would encourage you to say, how are you going to measure that so that you know? And then what's going to happen if it doesn't? How are you going to claw the fire department back?
There'd be an exit clause in any merger.
I think things like numbers of volunteers available, response time, those kinds of things. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, it'd be good to have several metrics like that.
Right, and I encourage you
Yeah.
to write it down.
Yeah.
Very good. Any other questions, discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion to authorize staff to begin negotiations for the merger.
Well, I still move. That's a good idea.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good, Rick.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is 8E, General Manner of Objectives Review.
So each of the committees has reviewed these, so this is just a compilation for those of you who are not on various committees to see where everything stands. It's your pleasure, Jeff. I know we're going to have a longer meeting with the next topic, so do you want to go through line by line, or are there any questions? And maybe that's easier.
Do you want to take this line item, or just
I
in
personally
general?
don't think that's necessary. I'll just comment. I went through, of course, I'm familiar with the planning and the financial, and then looked at the others. It looks to me like there are some that are what I would call green complete. There are quite a few more that are definitely in progress. Whether they'll be done by the end of June or not is a question, but some are explicitly won't be, but with good reason. So I would say there's a lot of those. There are some that are just listed as pending, which to me means they're not the highest priority. The staff will get to those things as they can. And there are only one or two that I put in as red, which basically doesn't mean that they weren't done. They were done, but it was sort of not the result that I might have hoped for. So, I mean, I'm happy with. I mean, if anyone in the audience has questions about them, but I don't think we have to go. We've done it by committee, so.
My only comment, there's a few items in here that are pending, which I think they're actually ongoing. The Summer Festival is one of them. I assume the planning is ongoing on that. So
Correct. It is.
rather than pending, it's
In
more of an
progress.
ongoing item. But I agree with Eric. I think in general we're making good progress on the objectives, and I'll open it to discussion or questions.
I think it's good progress.
Thank you.
Well, we agree on progress. So with no other questions or discussion, we'll move on to item 8F, mid-season snow removal review.
Oh, that won't be controversial.
No, I imagine there'll be a little more discussion on this one.
All right, moving on to 8G. Is there anything else? So, just the way I'd like to structure this, and if the board concurs, briefly go over the report, which is much hasn't changed since last time. There's some new numbers that we've given you for February, but I'd like each of the respective departments to talk a little bit about what they're experiencing in snow removal. So I've had Dave, Joe, Derek, and Brandy that would like to talk about the respective utilities as well as the snow removal. So, as a just brief overview, in February, probably is where we want to start looking on that table. You can see there's been a pretty substantive increase in staffing over what we saw in January. Of course, that's also because the weather was 25 feet in 28 days. That also resulted in that. We do have an update on equipment. We're continuing to have issues with our trackless machines, with 2 continuing to be down for the count, or so it looks. The blade issue was resolved. Dave Waddle bulldogged that pretty hard and made their life miserable until they cried uncle and gave us something that was workable and suitable, and they basically are guaranteeing it beyond its normal warranty life because they gave us such a poor product at the beginning. So big shout out to Dave for that. Routes with the prioritization seems to be working well. I can tell you, and Bob can attest to this, I mean, we had 70 people at one point taking advantage of the prioritization notification system. So that's been pretty positive, aside from yesterday. Rick put a line break and an exclamation point, which I now understand the exclamation point was not the issue, but he actually hit return in his daily message, which crashed the whole system at 9 o'clock yesterday morning. So good job, Rick. But Bob was, along with Mindy Lou, was able to get that back up and running and find the error. So we don't hit return anymore when we write our messages. So that's actually been pretty good. We've been trying to provide an update on that message. Who's working, what equipment's, well, not who's working, but how many people are working, what equipment's running, how our shifts are working. So feedback on that has been overwhelmingly positive. We do have quite a bit in GPS. We'll do that at the end of the presentation. We'll come back to that. I think that's important to talk about, but I'll leave that off to the side for now. And then future operational considerations, really, what does the board want to see as we move forward in the future with staffing levels, salaries and wages, housing, incentives. Had a couple good meetings with staff about about incentives and what form that could take. If someone can run a loader and a trackless, maybe there's a higher pay rate for that person. Or if they return year after year, they get an automatic bump. Something to incentivize returning people, because as Dave notes and is noted in the report, it's 2 years before someone's adequately trained to run the east side, because those driveways are more complicated in some areas. So that's another thing, incentives that we need to consider. And so with that, I'll probably just I'd like to just turn it over to Dave and Joe to talk a little bit about what they've seen this season and show a few slides of what they've encountered. And is that okay with the board if we go to that? Hearing no objections. So you can see we've had 92 inches of snow since February 2nd. Wasn't the biggest and greatest. Can everybody see the screen okay, even in the audience? Okay. So it's definitely been a big year. So just want to go through a few slides, just kind of show what these guys are dealing with. It's important, I think, for the board and people to understand. This is a good picture of snowdrift. A really aggressive storm where we were just able to keep one lane open of the road in triage mode. That's all we could do, is just keep that open. But then the wind was just blowing it. We're constantly dealing with snow turtles and illegal parkers. This guy has been Dave's best friend over the season. He's I don't think there's been a day he hasn't come in and talked about the guy who keeps poaching spots illegally and creating havoc for our snow removal operators trying to get around him. This is the new blade we talked about that Dave worked on, or got done for us. So everything's working good with it. He's inspecting it weekly to make sure that it's still in the tip-top shape for what we paid. Now, this is a little video. I'd like you to see what our operators see in a normal snow removal. Can you hit play? Is it playing? Hit play. No. Go over it, scroll over it on the top. There you go. There you go. That's what it looks like when our guys are in a storm. This is why snow turtles are a problem. This is why staking cars appropriately is a problem. This is why parking in roads is a problem. This is what our guys see out of a trackless in a normal storm when it's snowing. So it's not all sunshine and flowers. There's a snow turtle that's staked. Oops. Maybe. There it is. Snow turtle that actually was staked. So that's good. By staff. There's a snow turtle that was not staked. Prius. Good for them for getting in. There's another snow turtle not staked. And these are constant problems. This is trying to plow around these is an issue. And when we do plow around them, when they finally leave, they shovel all their snow into the remainder of the parking pad that was just plowed. And then people go, why is my parking pad not plowed? Well, because your neighbor decided to shovel all the snow where we just plowed. This is an example of a resident parking in the road instead of a parking pad on Yarrow Wintergreen. Right in our way, this has been a constant source of problems throughout the season. This is people parking in a fire lane. And now, obviously, the sign's not there, but we need to dig out the sign. But you can see the T-handle, and it's a known fire lane. And
This was yesterday.
This was yesterday, and this resident is aware it's a fire lane and parked there anyway. Just giving you an idea of, what we're looking at in terms of what the roads look like. People shoveling snow out into our contract after we've plowed, and then we get complaints that the road's not plowed because there's a pile of snow there. Well, someone just shoveled it there. This is at the Meadows. This is a Prius that thought he could four-wheel drive. There is a theme here. So this one, what was this one, Rick?
Propane road.
Oh, this is our propane road. You can see Vale is berming our propane road, so we have to go and back Vale's snow out of the contract. Now, Vale has generally been good trying to avoid hitting us, but they do berm us in sometimes. But I think Dave and Joe have a pretty good working relationship with Elliot that they can tell him, hey, can you watch that or quit blowing snow over into Palisades Drive, which is the other one they do. Well, this is behind the powerhouse. That was some pretty fancy work to get that done, but just kind of showing the magnitude of the snow that we're seeing. Talking about people shoveling this is a resident shoveling, or resident's contractor shoveling his deck off into our contract. Then the resident complained that there was snow in his driveway after we had already plowed it. So this is something else that staff's dealing with. And the problem becomes, maybe not in this case, but they're also shoveling ice. Our equipment can't handle ice. So when ice is shoveled into the contract, they have to have someone else remove that because it destroys our equipment. And it simply can't handle it. So that's another issue we've been dealing with, especially with roof shoveling. Some people have been very good about notifying us when they're doing that. I saw Cheryl out shoveling the other day. Did you see me wave to you when I drove into the Meadows the other day? And so they were very good. They notified us that they were shoveling the roofs. They tried to keep all the ice out of our contract, and what was in there, they actually moved themselves, which is what needs to be done, and we appreciate that notification. This is a fire call that we received, and the alarm was triggered because they were shoveling all the snow off the roof, and so that somehow that triggered the alarm. So that Rick responded to that one. This is a fire lane. You can see we didn't plow the middle of the fire lane. There have been cars parked at base camp in this road throughout the season, so we're unable to get in there, but we are able to keep, you can see the access to the right, the emergency access, able to try and keep that up as much as we can when the cars are gone. It's just management of HOAs keeping people out, helping us help them by being able to remove their fire lanes. This is roof. This is all snow that was shoveled into our contract at base camp. They understood when they did this that this is an extra. It's ice. They need to remove the ice before we can get in there with our equipment and get it out of there. And so those are the pictures. So with that, I'd like to turn over to Dave and Joe, and they can give their spiel. So you guys get to come on up.
You guys are looking better than I expected.
We've been doing it a while.
Well, thanks for everyone being here, and hopefully this isn't a mid-season review where we have a lot more snow to come. So hopefully we're getting to the end of all this at some point. Just want to talk about a few of the issues. Eric and Rick went over a bunch of different things, but just some of the difficulties and stuff that we keep continually talking about, especially on high snow years like this. One of the problems that he was just talking about is parking. Huge issues with cars in our ways and most contracts. Parking in the roadways, parking in cul-de-sacs. Cul-de-sacs are very small and tight areas, normally built out with driveways and homes. There are no ramps, not good areas to be able to move snow. So anytime a car is parked in a cul-de-sac, our loaders are about 30 feet long. Whatever, it's hard to maneuver and turn in them anyway, so it adds extended amount of time in associations when we cannot move along the roads. Cul-de-sacs are the worst. For one, it's a fire lane turnaround. It's hard for us to get the snow. Most of the snow has to get pushed out of a cul-de-sac down to a road in order for us to actually blow it somewhere. So when they inhibit us and impede snow removal by parking the road, especially cul-de-sacs and stuff, it adds a lot of time, and just you have to start putting snow in spots that it shouldn't be put in to try to open up roads and driveways for people. Then we get into years like this when there are normal big years, and we have to touch the snow multiple times to get it to where it goes, especially when we have to deal with cars and people. Very frustrating on our side. It's a difficult job. As you're seeing in some of the pictures, we can't see very well in the first place. So it makes a huge difference for us as in keeping cars in parking pads where they're supposed to be. Not all associations have parking pads and stuff, so some are a bit easier we don't have to deal with. East Meadows, most people are in their driveways or in their garages, so it's not as big of an issue for us dealing with cars. But in most other contracts, the commercial and KMA, it's a huge problem for us to be able to do our snow removal. Yeah.
Can you repeat? You said for KMA is a huge problem for the parking pad or for what? I didn't understood what you are meaning.
Just when they're parked on the sides of the roads and not in a parking pad. And then there's honestly a lot of people over there that have driveways that are built and they don't park in their driveways, they don't park in their garages, and they insist on parking in parking pads, which are taking up other parking spots for people that don't have driveways and don't have garages. Because most of the garages are so small they can't get their cars in them anyway, so they don't park in the driveway so we can do the driveway, but then they're clogging all other areas for other residents to be able to park their cars. And just feels like the entitlement of people. A lot of people have been here a long time. It's a beautiful place, but they insist in parking in front of their house when there are parking spaces available. It doesn't seem like they want to walk very far. Just causes huge issues for snow removal and snow storage. When we get into seasons like this, everything changes as you get to 300-400 inches. Everything has to be touched multiple times to get it to spots where there's not houses built. So we can put it in areas we're not burying houses, roof sheds. Mother Nature's doing a great job at that of her own. So we try to move the snow and put it into places where we're not burying houses and there's open lots. So it takes a lot to do that. Most snow storages on driveways and stuff at this point have been almost used up. So most of the snow at this point in most driveways has to be blown into the roadway and then cleaned again. So it's very time consuming at this point in a season. And lots of reasons why we got to this part of the season. Timing of snowstorms is huge for us in staffing. When it snows, we have our night crew out running. They go home at 4:30. We deal with the commercial area during the nighttime when there's not as many cars and people down there, so it's safer for us and we can actually move around and do a more efficient job. But when they go home at 4:30 and it continues to snow, by 8 o'clock in the morning, there's another foot of snow out there. So now we're trying to move the 2.5 feet on the west side and the east side and maintain the commercial area, fire access, safety, garage entrances and stuff, and we just don't have enough staffing and equipment to deal with that. Timing of storms is really huge when it comes in and in between crews and shifts. Makes a big difference for us. Another thing was just types of snow we talk about all the time. Beautiful Utah snow we got a few weeks ago. Super cold, really nice, great for skiing, all the different things, but that creates its own issue. When we get that much cold snow, we do a lot of ramping. We can't keep up. The ramps, they get so soft. They're nice and built, but when we get that much snow, you're pushing it off our ramps, and the ends of our ramps get really soft because it's cold snow. It hasn't had time to set up, so it takes us a lot longer to actually move the snow on the ramps because you start getting stuck on your ramps. You can't push it off the end. So then ultimately the ramps get clogged with snow. We have to take our big blower RPM out and blow them off. So it's just the impact of the type of snow and the timing of the snowstorms makes a huge difference on how we can keep up on the snow.
What do you call the ramp?
What
do you call the ramp, yes?
We don't have as many in the west side or the east side
for
anymore.
the garage, for the driveways.
It's where we actually use a machine made to move dirt, and we move snow, not with a snowcat that's designed for snow. It's something designed for dirt. It takes a long time to pack it down, wheel pack it. You get stuck, you have to backplate it. to maintain these ramps so we can push the snow off of them. Makes a big difference for us. A lot of areas have been eliminated. The KMA, we kind of eliminated a lot of the ramps that used to get done with the snowcat years ago. Now what Dick Reuter used to call rotary, we use our blowers to open those spots up for quick snow storage. Down on the bottom of Hockwee, there's some up on Dangberg, a few different places, yeah. So we can maintain cul-de-sacs and keep them open in big storms. We have a place to put the snow and not leave it in the roadways and stuff. But a lot of that stuff has been eliminated over time, which adds to the difficulty of removing the snow and keeping roads open when it snows that much. Just, you know, the visibility and windy storms like that, I mean, like you saw in the video, I mean, we can't see it. It's very hard moving around in some of those areas. We kind of touched on the basis of abandoned cars. We've had seems abnormal amount of abandoned cars this year in almost all contracts. Early season this year, there's been a Mercedes that we've had moved from Sun Meadows in November, and now it's been buried in base camp since it moved then. Just doesn't seem like a lot of help as in moving cars and clearing areas. I thought the PUD, we've done a pretty good job of sending out emails and photos to different associations asking them for help. It's kind of weird because we don't get any response from people. We send it out there asking the lodge, hey, if you could move these cars, we can get in there and clean these areas. No response from them for weeks, and then all of a sudden, hey, can you come do this? You know, but it doesn't seem like the HOAs are controlling the parking. Most of them, it seems like we've asked earlier this year what their parking policies are. Most of them don't even know what their parking policies are, let alone uphold them to get people to move. Cars stay in the same places for long periods of time, abandoned, broken down cars, right where we have to push snow. Anytime we have to push snow up and around them, just takes a lot of extra time. So it'd be very helpful for us if the HOAs and the property managers would actually find out what the parking policies are and enforce them, and would make a big difference on making it more efficient and helping costs go down versus go up. It seems like we don't get a lot of help in those areas. Is that pretty true, Joe?
It's been that way for years. I think a lot of it came from losing Woodford's. Used to be able to threat with towing. That's completely gone. I mean, when have you guys seen a tow truck up here unless someone breaks down now? We used to tow a lot when I worked for the resort, when I ran parking. That was always a good threat, and we actually did that. But now it just seems like everybody knows no one's going to get towed. Vail won't tow. They don't want to, make their customers angry. But yeah, it's just, that would help us immensely. It's like when we pull in there, some nights, people are at the bar, they leave their cars, especially around the, it's not Bub's anymore, what is it? Cornice Pizza. Yeah. But yeah, it's just that all that impacts everything, and then they move, and everybody wants something done after they've moved, and they don't realize that we've bypassed them because of this situation.
So can I make a comment regarding towing? KMA actually has studied towing and had counsel involved with it, and it is not straightforward, and there's basically, as an HOA, you incur the costs, whatever it is, whenever it is, and then you have to be able to go recoup the cost. Sounds pretty simplistic, but it's not something that we budget for every year to be able to tow. And there's been lots of yellow lights flashed at us by council that says, you may need some professional expertise before you begin to tow.
Thanks. Dave, first of all, I want to say that you have done an excellent job in the many years that you have been here in snow removal. And I've been totally impressed with how good our snow removal has been until we hit this year. And I know that there's equipment problems, and I know that there's manpower problems. But you had it figured out how to keep us plowed out. And you've done an excellent, excellent job. And I know you're trying to make the best of a bad situation as far as the amount of equipment and manpower you have. But maybe we should take advantage of your previous expertise and change a few things that have worked for us in the past, go back to those, and see if we can just do a little better job. And on a personal note, I want to thank you for my parking pad. It was great when I got here yesterday. Terrific.
And I agree. I mean, I think over time, budgeting, things like that, trying to make things more efficient has gotten in our own way of doing it. When you talk about things like that, we had more staffing. We staffed way higher than we used to, and we had seasonal people, not year-round people all the time from other departments. We actually had people that are dedicated snow removal, that's their job, so they want to do a better job, and they're accountable for their job. They don't just go back into their other department knowing that they have a year-round job. They're actually dedicated, and they're held accountable. We used to staff 11 people during the winter times. We haven't had that type of staffing levels in a lot of years. Equipment is now aged and not being replaced, which is part of the issues. We're having more downtime with machines that needs to be dealt with, and just never really having a mechanic. For the first time, we've had people that we've called mechanics, but we actually have a real mechanic now, which makes a huge difference. In the past few years, when somebody ran out of fuel, somebody had some problems, it's either Joe or I really getting out of our equipment, not doing snow removal, and trying to solve those problems, which is now a machine's down, that operator's down, and then one of your top 2 snow removal people are down trying to solve that. So, I mean, I think we're going in a right direction, but yes, a lot of things, machines need to be maintained better, upkept better, newer, and more staffing is huge. And part of staffing is housing. On the year like this year, being snowed out. I mean, a lot of people have been here a long time. Some people haven't. Who remembers the roads closing this much? And it's not just Caltrans being understaffed. 80 and 50 have been closed. I mean, it shows the impact and magnitude of this winter and what's going on. And having people that are in the valley, not snowed out, that can get here to do snow removal, makes a huge difference.
One more thing, Dave, I wanted to respond to that you said. Both times KMA was sent information about a car being parked and not moved, we have acted upon the email. We haven't ignored them. We've received 2 emails about it, and we've done the best we can to take care of it. So it's not all HOAs who are not responding.
No, and I agree with that. It's just an overall, most we're not getting much help from. And then, you know, on the other side of buried cars and stuff, it's the marking of them. I mean, I understand people are here to go skiing and do stuff, but I mean, it snows 2.5 feet overnight, the car's completely buried, they walk by it to go skiing, they don't remove the snow, they don't stake it, they don't do anything till 5 o'clock at night. You know, and now they're trying to do something, we've been dealing with it all day long. As far as I know, no other associations are marking cars or anything. We're actually using our own district staff, our own poles, our own material to do what I feel the association's job should be versus ours. Because every time we're doing that, it's taking away manpower from doing actual snow removal. So, I mean, marking cars, getting people to dig the snow off so at least we can see them makes a huge difference on us being able to clear them and do it efficiently. So.
Dave, how many snow turtles have we actually hit?
I think 2 this year, as far as I know.
That's pretty amazing.
It really is. I mean, and part of it is, I mean, we try to train our operators. I mean, if you can't see it or you can't tell, don't blow it. You know, and that's part of our issues. I mean, in the evenings and stuff, it's very difficult to see. And so every big pile of snow looks like a car. So, I mean, the more we can see and stuff and they're visible makes a big difference for us to be able to move it.
So I'd like to echo what Judy just said, is in the past, we've had more snow than this in KMA, and I've always appreciated, Dave, you and your staff being able to stay on top of it. And whatever's happened this year, it's frustrating beyond all get out. I haven't spent as much time up here this winter as I have in the past, but when I got up here this morning, I drove around. I look at Yarrow, I look at Wintergreen. I mean, what the heck has happened with Wintergreen? Oh my gosh. This is the second time this has happened where you've got it down to one lane. I drove up Daneburg, I drove down Hockley. In my opinion, Hockley is in the best shape. But go back to what you were doing, because whatever you're doing now, it's not working.
Well, actually, I'd like to amend that. I think the last storm was your best storm. It was not the biggest storm, but I think, at least on my neck of the wood, that means Fremont, Denberg, I think you did the perfect job for the last storm. So, and that was not, I would not have said that for many storms before, but I think last storm you were just right on the top of it, and I felt like we are back to normal, like we used to do. Yeah.
And, moving past all those things you got to talk about, I mean, part of that is it comes down to staffing and equipment. Without the right staff and equipment, we can't do the job no matter what the theory is. And part of that is it's training. It takes a long time to train people. It takes minimum of 1 year per contract, and we call them, the West Meadows, the East Meadows, and the commercial. It really takes an operator an entire full year to learn one contract. So, I mean, to have a trained employee that comes back all the time, multiple years in a row, makes a big difference. But, I mean, you just can't send people out there. We used to bring our staff on a lot earlier in the seasons, what we called area familiarization, doing snow stakes. We'd get our rookies in here, and they'd walk the contracts, putting up the snow stakes. At that point, you can see the houses, you can see the roads, you can see all the things that you can't see once it gets covered in snow, and we are able to train people. We don't bring staff in early enough anymore to be able to do that. And when you're trying to train somebody right now, they're sitting in a car like your car. You can't even see a house. You can't see over the bank. You have no idea where anything is, and we're trying not to blow out windows and bury pathways and stuff. So, I mean, unless they're trained beginning of the season when they're new, or they have a lot of years under their belt, it's difficult and super slow for them.
But that's part of KMPUD job. I mean, you sign contract at the beginning of season. This is your job to staff at the beginning, to have the staff for it. Otherwise, don't take the contract.
Yep. Find us some staff,
Yeah.
Tron.
Nobody's got them.
Find some. And find somebody that actually can run a piece of equipment. I mean, it's a diamond.
If you cannot find staff, don't take the contract. I'm saying that's, yeah.
Then Caltrans should just shut down. They don't have staff.
No, I'm saying this is part of KMP's job to find the staff, so maybe you need to be more proactive earlier.
And then topic of the last storms, let's go through January to February. I was home for 6 days in the month of February. It snowed 5 to 6 days. Well, we got 4 feet in frickin' 6 to 7 hours. I mean, I don't know what you want us to do.
Sometimes.
No, I'm not criticizing what you do. You did.
Well, you just rated us on our
If you
work.
are staff, you are not going to be able to make it. So I'm saying the PUD need to be more proactive in making sure it has sufficient staff. And there is a number of action, like accommodation, where do you put these people? Because if the roads are closed, they cannot come in. So all these things need to be more studied, so we have a working solution.
Agreed, and that's why costs are going up, because it costs more to train people, get the right equipment, get housing to get them here, all those things.
Yeah, but staffing is less than 20% of the snow removal cost as of today. So it is a cost, but actually it's not going to impact that much the cost of the contract.
Why don't you keep going over what else you wanted to cover, and then we can debate the nuances of budgeting.
And, just going back to the training side of things, is how long it actually takes to get trained operators and to find an operator that actually understands how to run equipment. Like I said, it's a diamond in the rough to find somebody that can actually learn this stuff in 3 years. So, I mean, it's difficult to find. You can't just hire anybody. So training, staffing, all that stuff makes a big difference, and we're going in the right directions on that. Other few different things, it's just shoveling of porches, decks, driveways, blowing them into there. It'd be nice if people would think about it a little bit more. If there's 5 feet in your driveway, it's not really the best time to have your porch shoveled, because now we got 5 feet and 5 more feet of snow on top of there. Just looking at it and timing it a little bit better for us makes a big difference. very difficult to remove 10 feet of snow out of someone's driveway.
Can I, Eric, I think it'd be perhaps more productive if we go into kind of what we propose to do going forward.
I think it's really important for everyone to understand what these guys are dealing with. I think there's a naivete on, oh, it's just snow, just blow it over there. And I think it's important to hear what they have to say.
Well,
'cause
yeah,
Rick and I are hearing this all the time, and I don't think the board and the public is hearing, but if you want to move on, we can.
Well, no, I agree with that. I think, at least, I think I have a pretty good understanding of what your problems are, and they, you know, we have insufficient staffing, the equipment,
Time
not much
spent on
help,
GPS.
you know, not much help and things like that. So what do we propose to do to solve some of these problems going forward, I think would be the discussion we need to have now. The problems we're, you know, we can sit here all day and talk about the problems, and I think we've covered them pretty much. So.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to cover?
I mean, and I, you know, just talk about the GPS pretty quickly. I mean, it's not as accurate as it could be. I mean, and at this point, I mean, we're going back to the old school where we time track for years. These are the sheets we have to fill out on a daily basis. Here's commercial you have to fill out. Here's west side, front, back. You have to fill it out. We spend so much time doing things and correcting the GPS. It's really taxing what we're doing also.
Dave, can I ask a question on that?
Yes, sir.
Is the majority of that driveways? Is the majority of that whole HOAs?
I mean, we're trying to track everything.
What if you didn't have to track driveways?
Anything that we could do to eliminate time spent doing that and doing snow removal.
But what I'm wondering is what proportion of time might be spent if you didn't have to do driveways? Measure the GPS driveways.
If the GPS actually tracked it, we wouldn't be doing this.
No,
but
I know,
it doesn't do it.
No, what I'm just saying is, what if
He's saying if
you don't have to
just
track the
HOAs
driveways?
and not driveways, would that help, and how much?
It would make a big difference. I think, you know, some of this stuff is just good for a paper trail or something to record issues that we deal with. But yes, you could eliminate driveways and stuff. I think it would make a huge difference. And just dealing with the associations isn't as hard. I mean, I think we do 150-something driveways throughout the valley. So yes, that would eliminate a lot of problems.
I would like to concur. I've looked at the data multiple times, and removing the driveway would actually reduce the number of entities to the HOAs, so that's much more easy to handle. And also the driveway are small, and so there is a lot more errors on small landmarks because you can just miss it, and then that screw up everything. So removing the driveway will make the GPS way much more accurate. Then they won't have to spend as much time trying to figure out what was going on.
Yes, agreed.
And we have a whole section on the GPS, but Bertrand has been very helpful to the district in helping us look through the data and providing some feedback and helping us catch and fix some things. So when we get to that, but I do want to acknowledge Bertrand has been a huge help on this year. So anything else you wanted to cover? Any other highlights?
You know, just one thing. I mean, the only way to catch up on storms and stuff is to blow the snow. And it comes down to staffing and other things and timing of snow. It's just our RPM. Our biggest blower needs to run more. That's how we can maintain roads and keep up. It moves more volume. It's way faster. But when we're blading with that machine, it only works on one of our machines right now. It needs to have the capability of running on multiple machines, giving us the ability to run it more, better lighting on it. That's our savior is that machine.
And we did order new lighting.
We have ordered new lighting. We're having a very difficult time in the mornings and evenings, being able to see cars, people, things like that. So we've added some lighting to it, or have ordered it, we're adding it to it. And just having the trained people to be able to run that. It's very, very difficult to run a 300 horsepower blower in conditions like that and move snow. So having trained staff, and I think you guys touched on that a little bit. I've always been a fan of, as in the pay scale, kind of like ski patrol. The more routes you know, the more money you make. If you can say, I can do the west side, well then this is one. If you can do the west side and the east side, if you can do the west side, east side, and commercial, know them all, and you can run every piece of equipment, there should be benefits to that, that there isn't at this point.
Right now, there's three of us.
Right, there's three of us that really can run the RPM and not kill people, blow houses down, things like that. So, I think it's very important on that side of things to take care of the people that know how to do that and set up an incentive program for people to come back and to put up with the difficulties of this job and the hard work that it takes. 12-hour days, 8-10 days straight. It's difficult. So I think there should be a better incentive program for people that are very good at their jobs.
We understand all these difficulties, and it's not new. It's been like that. The fact is, and it's not the biggest year also.
Nope.
In the past, you guys were on the top of it, so you have to go back to that level.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we keep talking about that in the past everything was better. I went back and looked because I have access to all of Michael's emails for as long as he was here. And every big year like this year, the amount of complaints was about the same as what we're seeing now. So it wasn't that people were complaining in those other big years. People have just forgotten because we had a lot of light years the last 4 years. So, I'm happy to share all of Michael's emails where the complaints you could cut and paste into January of this year.
Subjectively, I agree, though, with what they had said. Nancy, Judy, and Bertrand. And I think subjectively, I think it's been worse this year. It's my 23rd season. And I also agree with what Bertrand said, which is I was here last Sunday getting rid of 10 feet of heavy compact snow, left, came back last night, and it was better than it's been all season. So I don't know why or whatever, but maybe you knew you had a board meeting.
Staffing is a huge, we haven't had people to be able to come in.
So to respond to that, I kind of think we need a turnaround plan, and that's why I kind of jumped all over it in the January Operations Committee, and also asked for it to be on this agenda. Because I think we kind of need to start now. And what I mean by a turnaround plan is maybe, here's what we've had in the past. You've alluded to staffing a number of times. Here's what we have now, and here's what we think we need. And to get them in place earlier. So I've heard at least 4 things. One is staffing. It's not only quantity, but it's experience, and it's investment from our standpoint. And it's an investment in a multi-year relationship. And I'm sort of skeptical getting the emails from you about non-seasonal snow removal people. It always seems that when we get a storm, there's snowed out of the valley. So I think we need, kind of a turnaround plan. Here's where we were, here's where we are, here's where we need to be next year, and we're going to start now. Second is equipment. Maybe it's the engineer in me, but when I read about 6 track lists and 2 are down, it doesn't work. We got to figure out a way to get ahead of that. Now, I qualify that with what Brandy told me, which is we've had equipment problems every year. It's not uncommon for us to have 2 down. You just don't see it. You have to live with it. The third thing I think that we, of 4, that we, maybe I'll make it 5, that I would comment on is, this homeowner misbehavior, or homeowners association misbehavior. I think we need to get ahead of that. And, at least in our HOA, they used to write us nasty grams at the beginning of every year. You shall not do this, you shall not do that, blah, blah, blah. And we got to get back to that. And I know we have in East Meadows a dedicated snow removal person, and they're pretty good at harassing the district, I think. Well, he's a pretty nice guy. We got to get in the business, I think, of going back after them. Because in my particular case, Michael used to admonish all of us about not, my house. If I have to dig out my walkway, there's only one place it's going to go. That's in the driveway that your people have to remove. We've got to go back to being proactive on those people. And that includes shoveling decks. I see it happening all the time. And if we don't complain as a district, this is not in the contract, they're going to keep doing it. It's like a child, okay? If you don't, And so I think we've got to get proactive on that. And that includes, I just got back from Alta, And Alta gets as much snow as we do, more or less. And their whole parking lot, they have an ordinance. They say you shall not park in this parking lot from 10 p.m. at night to XYZ. I don't know the answer, but I think we've got to solve the turtle problem or the car problem. And so that would be 3. 4, hey, the GPS system, I think by all accounts, isn't working sufficiently. And I personally think it's a hardware problem, okay, because of the accuracy that Bertrand and I discussed in October. So we got to go solve that problem, I think. And, you know, Bertrand's conclusion at the last meeting, which Bob agreed with, is that the accuracy of the GPS is not actionable. You had a fancier word. It's not precise enough for it to be meaningful for driveways, is essentially what you said in your memo, I think. Is that true?
Yeah, so actually, I think there are 2 problems. One of them is the scanning rate, which is not appropriate for small entities because it just doesn't scan often efficiently. And the second is accuracy, and I think that's just an equipment issue. That probably is easy to solve as well.
Yeah.
But so in the end, it basically generates more problem. I mean, it creates problems that you cannot resolve. I mean, when you try to curate the data, because beside the fact it's become Dantesque now with 200 entities, I mean, how much time, how much night you are going to spend on that, that's defeat the purpose of the having just a timer on each machine will be more efficient time-wise. So it has to fix the GPS. As of now, it's basically unreliable data.
Yeah, and we've reached out. Steve King is checking other vendors to see if anyone wants to compete for our. We've continued to talk to Sierra Signal, Sierra Electronics to install new digital radios. One other entity uses their digital radios and a digital tower to basically track their GPS. No one we've talked to uses GPS to track time of their snow removal. They just use it to make sure Billy Joe Bob's not sleeping in a cul-de-sac when he should be plowing snow. That's what it's generally used for. So we're doing something new here, and I think that's interesting. And right now it's working for HOAs. I think Bob and Bertrand and I agree that GPS is accurate for HOAs. We've done a few time tests. Dave's done actually quite a few time tests. Just turns on this snow phone, turns on the videos that Drew cross-checks the start and stop time, cross-checks it against what we're seeing out of Fleet Track and Report Server, and generally plus or minus 2.5% is what we're seeing on that. So it's very accurate in terms of the HOAs, what we're seeing there. So one of the things Bertrand and I have talked about a lot, and I know I've talked with other board members, is if we eliminate driveway contracts and go to the East Meadows model. That eliminates HOA's complaint, which rightly so, driveways aren't being actually accurately captured and they're being charged for them. That's true. I don't think anyone would argue that. And we would be happy to provide them with our insight of Bertrand's driveway is a 2 EDU driveway and Frank Majors is a 3, and assess them accordingly, however that might be. And so if we go to a model like that, I think that would be something that would be very helpful, one, in terms of satisfying the HOA's concerns. So that's where we're working, and we are working on trying to get better GPS equipment or get a price, but how much more money do we want to throw after hardware when I need labor and I need to replace my big equipment? What's more important to the district? Or do we want to do both and, have the associated cost increases?
Yeah, but just to finish, I think we kind of need a deadline on that. Meaning, let's solve the GPS accuracy problem or not, or conclude we can't, within like a 2-month period, as opposed to it being, sort of perpetually on the to-do list. And so that would be a 5th thing, is the contract that you just made. I wrote these down. I'll write them down for you. I think they all need to be in kind of a turnaround plan. And the last one is really where this stands on the general manager's priorities. And that's kind of why I asked for this meeting. And you and I had, an exchange, I'll call it that, in January or February, where I think this is a high priority, providing this service. And I think it needs to be a high priority of yours. And we can probably debate that here.
I have a question.
Sure.
What
and then
are
lastly,
expectations? What is your expectations? How fast do you think we can do it? Because when we took a contract over in the East Meadows, I was the only trackless operator. I was out there for 15 hours sometimes. No complaints like we get now. We can't drop out of the sky and move the snow. I mean, it takes so long to do that. If you get 4 feet in the driveway, now we're talking 30 minutes per driveway at the least. It's just, I mean, I don't know what we can do except throw like 10 tracklesses out there.
Well, I think we got to get some additional labor in here. And I think we have to get either more reliable or more equipment, or maybe both.
We're really
and
limited
by
in
the
what
way,
we can put out there.
Nancy said it very well. Is it? I forget who said it. You guys, we the board have great respect for your knowledge, skills, and work in snow removal. That's kind of why you're here. And I think we need to get back to what we considered, frankly, state of the art before. So we're here to help you, not criticize you.
No, I don't know. We just get, all these things.
And that's why I'm
Just
kind of
curious
going with a
where-
turnaround plan. I think we need a written document that is sort of like this, but it sort of says, here's where we were when we did state of the art. Here's where we were now. If there's been growth in our contracts where Joe Pellerin and Dave Waddle can't do everything or parachute out of the sky, then we need to try to augment that. I also, as a treasurer, don't want the budget to be an excuse. Okay, and of course I don't want you spending money. And I read Eric's line in his report saying, here's what we spent. I think it was 164. If we doubled it, here's where we would be. I think we've got to be smarter than that. But and Judy said it to me in one of these emails, is that, well, first of all, we've underspent somewhat this year. But second of all, and Bertrand said it, there's 20% of our budget is labor, right?
That's not accurate. It's not at all accurate.
It's about 45%.
Replicate that number.
It's about 45%.
And if you look at the G&A allocation, G&A is mostly labor.
Yeah, so the
dropping
salaries are what
20%.
you say, but we've also got the benefits, the payroll tax, and so on, and then we have the G&A. So I just checked it. It's not counting the G&A. It's 43%. That's the salary, wages, payroll taxes, and employee benefits.
I guess my last point, I think we need to be smart about the turnaround plan. We need to decide what it costs, and we need to make the proposal to each of the HOAs. They want the service. Yes, they want lower costs, but they want the service, is what I'm hearing.
It's just, I guess, understanding the expectations of the associations and the people we do it for. And I mean, it's very simple to me. I can answer every one of those 5 questions on what we need to do and what we need to carry better and stock up here better and to do to solve all those problems. But we got to get back to doing it that way and not be so, micromanaged about things of how to do it when we're getting away from the way it should be done. So.
Bravo, Dave. Bravo.
So it sounds like we're kind of in agreement.
I think a lot of things could be done a lot better to provide a better service for everybody, but yes, some things need to be talked about, timelines need to be set up, and things need to go in a better direction.
So I would encourage the board to definitely involve Dave. Let's hear what Dave has to say, and Joe too. So if there's,
Sure.
Thank you. I think this has been a really valuable discussion, and one of the things that it points out to me is that we have a need for some education in the communities across the HOAs about what their part is to help you guys as opposed to be in your way all the time. We've got a lot of new homeowners in the valley, whether that's in the commercial area or in KMA, and we need to spend some time this summer. I'd be happy to spend some time with you and Joe and develop an outreach piece that actually presents, these are the things that you must do, and these are the things that will help us, and when should you clear your steps of your deck? Do you do it when you know the guy's going to come in to move the snow, or do you wait till, oh look, they're here now, it's easier for me to go outside? I mean, that's nonsense. I mean, that's just, it's common sense, And so I'm offering my services if I can help you guys put together sort of a community education piece and that, and I'm sure that Frank, the HOAs that he manages, that he could reinforce that or encourage people that these are best practices to help you guys. I mean, because this is a community, we've got to work together. And you guys, I think, are doing the very best you can, and I thank you for that.
I agree with what you're saying, Cheryl, and I mean, it's just always been the problem of property management stuff don't build in the cost to deal with cars. They've never dealt with the parking of cars, the parking policies. Like you mentioned going to Alta, every other ski resort I go to, they have signage everywhere. They enforce signage. They do the things that need to be done. When the renters come, renters know what they're supposed to be doing. It's just gotten away in Kirkwood where it's a free-for-all and it's very difficult. You know, property managers need to manage the properties, which is the people, the renters, the cars, and helping us. When they're doing snow removal, opening up the walkways, they're looking at the cars parked in the wrong spots and doing things. Nothing's being done. So I think a community education and associations doing their part would go a long way.
So just the ability to be consistent across the HOAs, I think, is a valuable exercise. We do seem to be challenged, and I particularly know that Mercedes-Benz issue because I've been back and forth on that with the Association of Base Camp. But we also need to have the legal aspects clarified so that vehicles that are on private property, that are owned by someone else, we have to have a mechanism, perhaps through the sheriff, that allows us to move the vehicle. As an association, we may not be able to recover the funds, but the owner needs to understand that they may not be able to recover their vehicle. So we're challenged with that, but I think the idea of getting the associations together, Cheryl, thanks for the help in the communication, is something that if we are consistent, then the message for each association will be crystal clear about what the steps will be. And then we can work with the authorities and legal advice to get all of our policies across all the HOAs going in the same direction.
Okay, good. I think the discussion has kind of run its course.
Okay,
but if I could, and I'll come back to you, Eric. I like Standish's idea of a turnaround plan. I think what we need is a date specific where we'll be getting a turnaround plan. I'm particularly concerned about the bigger issue of staffing and housing, because without housing, the staffing isn't going to be there. So we need a housing solution in the short term and for the long term. But go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a turnaround plan, as Dave and Joe have said, really depend on staffing and what you just said. So you can't have a turnaround plan. You can have the plan, but you can't implement it without the staffing. So what I'm wondering is, could we budget for, I mean, we could talk about this during budgeting, but could we budget for one more full-time snow removal person year-round to work under Joe and Dave, however that's organized, at their direction during the winter, and they could do summer projects or whatever in the summer. So we've got 3 full-time people who are here year after year after year, and then could we try to hire, go after X number, I don't know, 3, 4 snow removal folks who would be full-time from mid-October to end of April or mid-May or whatever that time period is. And as Dave suggested, that year after year, I mean, they would be basically guaranteed, assuming good performance, work the next year and the next year and the next year. Maybe with the incentives of increases in pay each year as they become more experienced. And then Y number of temporary snow removal people who might be laid off if we end up in a drought year or a dry month or something like that. But, I mean, some combination like that so that you've got a core group of 6 people, say, during the winter who are really fully experienced, don't have to be trained year after year after year, and then another handful, or whatever that number is, who may change year to year, need to be trained, and so on. But you've got the core.
Which is what it used to actually be when we
Okay.
first started building snow removal for the PUD.
So on the staffing side, that's what I would really encourage, and if we have to increase rates to compete for that talent, then that's what we have to do in this environment. I mean, I agree. If we're going to offer the contracts, we need to know that we can resource the contracts, and if that means going out in June and going recruiting for an October start, that's what we need to do.
And, we've gotten away from that theory, which is one of the issues why we don't have that type of employees now. We've been using year-round people for years, which we've lost that pool of
I think
people to draw from.
this is a hangover. My guess is it's a hangover from the drought years when we were really struggling financially.
And, we'll have more issues. We'll staff up like this, and then we'll have 2-3 drought years in a row, and people's mentalities start going the other direction, and that's part of the problem.
But if
You
we can
have
always
to
have that
prepare for
core
a
of-
big year every year.
But if we can have that core of 6 people, that we can handle.
Yep.
That's what I mean, rather than a core of 2 people, plus Drew and others from other departments.
Right.
And, we budgeted that way to have the 4 to 5. We just couldn't get the 4 to 5 people at the beginning of the year. We just couldn't find them. And so,
Well, the question is, when do we begin and what are we offering? If we have to, like we say, it's competition, right? It's competition for talent, and that's what you got to do.
yeah, they have to be completely competitive there for sure.
So I would just like to second Standish's notion. This valley doesn't run in the winter if we don't have snow removal. It just doesn't. It's even though it's not a commodity carried through a pipeline or a conduit, it's essential, just like fire department is essential. And if we're going to offer it, we've got to offer it as a top priority, along with it, without diminishing anything else. And that means the budget, it means the resources to do it. It means the HOAs have to be willing to pay whatever that costs, as long as we run it as efficiently as possible. And I think, Dave, I agree with you. I think we over-rotated on the efficiency at the beginning of the year. I think where we ran into trouble is not in February. We ran into trouble in the end of December and January. And that, I think, has already done a lot to turn around because of the increased staffing and because you got a mechanic.
Yeah,
So I think a lot has already turned around. I've talked to some folks in East Meadows, at least, not on the west side, but the east side, and said, now what are you thinking? I said, it's fine. So anyway, that's what it takes, the resources. And then,
Housing. We have 2 spots for snow removal and housing.
well,
2 spots.
yeah, so we
Yeah,
need.
could I add something to what you just said? I think the board seriously needs to consider purchasing housing for a short-term solution. Every time we've done that in the past, we've made money.
Yeah.
It's proven to be a good investment. That's how we helped pay for Lateral. And I would suggest that with this plan that we consider purchasing housing this summer.
No, Eric has also suggested that to me.
Somebody asked about time frame. I don't know. I'm willing to help you with write the plan. Okay, if you want to exchange drafts, I'll come up here and sit with you. I don't know if it would be possible to have a draft by the April meeting and a plan by May, or have a draft by April, refine it by May, and approve it in June. But the whole reason I raise this now is I think I want to get ahead of it, so we're not sitting here in September going, where are we going to get a mechanic or something like that.
Well, that will guide the budget too.
Right.
For that department.
So is it reasonable to have a goal of
The goal is
April?
April 13th.
Okay.
That is the goal. So, and if you're around any of those times, that'd be good to sit down.
So I wrote down 7 things. Labor, which is quantity, quality, timing, equipment, HOA communications, including turtles, a turtle solution, GPS accuracy, contracts, we're not signing 150 contracts or whatever we're signing, and we need your help for that, okay? Every year it's an acrimonious thing between PUD and KMA. Let's get to win together, where we get rid of that crap. Management attention, that's you. Eric, and housing.
Agreed. And, yeah, and then one thing I would, again, staff is very much of the opinion that going to the East Meadows model is a necessity in order for us to continue to provide service to all HOAs.
Okay, but then you have to deliver on that from our side, right? Because we all have the laws that we have to live within.
Understood.
And I'm intimately familiar with how East Meadows was permitted, and it's in our CCNRs, and it's probably not in their CCNRs. So we need a creative solution from Dick Shanahan, or you, or whoever.
Yeah.
But it's not all them. I mean, you know.
No, but remember, that's what I said earlier. We will provide all the data so that they can assess as they see fit based on our perceived level of difficulty. And, you know, if KMA built a new house built in KMA with a driveway, we would go and tell their committee, we think this is a 2 EDU driveway, and they would, and we're going to increase your contract by $1,000. They would be able to have a quantification of what that equals, and they would be able to assess that appropriately. And we've offered that multiple times, and we will continue to offer that to help them come up with the appropriate assessments or levels of effort for the respective driveways.
My last request is for you to look into whether we can physically tow cars. Meaning, if Vail doesn't want to do it, that's fine. If we've got all the legal mumbo-jumbo about why an HOA can't do it, that's fine. But if we have somebody in our way, can we get the thing towed?
I'll look into that.
And, you know, we may tow something and do the wrong thing, get fined. But let's get the cars out of the way.
You tow a couple of them and get that out
Of
there.
course.
People are going to start
Of
thinking
course.
about it. You don't have to tow a million. You tow one or two on a truck, people are going to start thinking.
One thing I can tell you is a new tow yard did open in Amador Pines area.
Yeah, my car got towed to it.
Did it really?
When I got into an accident, I know where that is.
Okay, so yeah, it's the new guy right there. Anyway, I drive by him all the time. So he actually has a tow yard. So if he's willing to tow in Kirkwood, I don't know, but I'll reach out to Shanahan. I'll reach out to him too and see if he's willing to do Kirkwood stuff. Assuming the Spur's open, of course.
Right.
But if the Spur's not open, no. Vail's already looked into this, and we can look into it more, but their resources are a little bit bigger than mine. They've looked into it, and they can't find anyone from the east side to tow. Is what's been
Woodford's
related to.
gone.
Woodford's is gone.
It's Silver State that comes
Silver State.
You'll get emergency service, but they won't do punitive tows. There's no one on that side that will do punitive tows. And that's Vail, but I can look into that as well. I'm happy to do that and just run it to ground.
Okay, let's, we'll wrap this up. Judy, you had a question or comment?
I just had one thing I wanted Standish to add to this turnaround plan, and that was a suggestion by Dave, that there be different pay scales based on the abilities of the drivers, so that the drivers who do can run anything, anywhere, get paid more. And this would also be an incentive for some young guy coming in to learn the system, knowing that if once I can run machines A and B, I'm going to get more money. Let's put it in there. Thank you.
That was my idea, but.
Who's the third one?
Joe Forrest.
Okay.
We were actually talking about the end of the season, possibly having when we still have snow on the ground, we still have seasonals here, and doing a training session,
Where we're not actually worrying about what's going on because the resort's closed, doing a training session, getting more people, even if they get a couple hours on the RPM, just to teach them how to do it. And we've already been kicking that can around, so we're working on improving seasonals to return to have a little bit bigger skill set.
Okay, Nancy?
So as you pursue all of this, I encourage you to, yes, get some numbers behind it, because as you all know, we're, waiting to hear what it's going to cost. I'm not so much concerned about the cost. I just want to be able to meet our obligations according to our legal requirements and be able to communicate that to our members.
So my question on that is KMA always wants the numbers as early as possible and earlier than everybody else. And then we end up not having a contract signed until October or November. Why is that?
Okay, I can explain that. So we want the numbers. We'd love to have the contract at the same time, but it's been the district's choice not to release those contracts till August. So then we begin to negotiate what's in that contract, and that's just the way it works. It's the financial legal obligation is we have Our drop dead date is in April because we then have to communicate to all our members what their assessment is going to be. And if we had the contract sooner, it'd be great. So maybe you add that to your list.
Yeah, can I respond to that?
Sure.
Because there's a kernel of truth and a misrepresentation in there. Prior to my coming, you never received contracts before August, sometimes as late as November. Since I've been here, last year you received them July 1st. So to say you received them in August is not true. You received them July 1st. And it was 144 days back and forth. Of the 144 days, KMA's attorney had 110 days of that in terms of delays. The district had 30. So let's be accurate in what we're representing, because that's not true.
Well, I can beg to differ, but
I can show facts.
It's just like we're all in the same bucket together. We can all work together. We can all solve this together. But I don't need to be concerned about 30 days, 144 days. Who's counting? It's let's get to the best contract that we can possibly get, and we want to make sure that we're sufficiently covered.
And then that goes what Sandra said previously, which I agree with, which is we should have one set contract for the district and not multiple variations. And
if I could, we have agreement that we're going to have a turnaround plan presented on April 13th. You can put into that turnaround plan any of these items that you feel we need to address. We don't need to address every item today here. So I think we've kind of run the gamut on this discussion item for the time being. The next board meeting, we will have the beginnings of a plan and to discuss, and I hope you'll all come back and participate in that discussion. Bertram, go ahead.
First, on the percentage, you need to take on the full season. You can just take the year. The percentage of the staff versus the contract price, because there are months where you have more labor, like January and February, than October, November, and so I'm saying your 33% is not accurate. You should go back, look at the season. Okay? We can take it offline. I'm talking about the labor percentage.
Well, I know. We just
took the annual cost.
The annual budget
Not
divided by the
annual
annual
cost.
It was 43%.
That's not what I see on my table here. That's okay. Second, last year we had the problem because there was manifest error in the GPS system that was used to do the pricing. So we ended up having a lot of discussion. Also, we were told that this would be fixed, but we still don't know that's going to be. There was this issue where your legal counsel started to put all responsibilities on the HOAs. That was not written in a way that was fair for the HOAs. So we come up with a system of co-insurance, which we can work with, but that was definitively part of the delay on the thing. So hopefully this year we have a system that's not biased against us, because there is curation that now is done on the data, so this is going to be more reliable, and there are multiple data points as well. So that would not be the issue. We are happy to keep working with the co-insurance. The liability issues are no longer in our way. And third, we'd like to know what you are going to do for the driveways, because that's going to change a lot. And we have not heard any discussion. I mean, I heard that it would be a nice idea to work on it, but if it's going to be the following year, let's say it now, and let me stop worrying about that. But it's going to change how things will be done if driveways are handled by HOA. So I think in your list for the next meeting, that's some kind of discussion on how we are going to deal with that driveway thing. Either we just push it back and come up with a three-size granularity costing, flat fee, or decide if you want to try to work on this moving the driveway to the HOA. But we need to know that now, because otherwise it's not going to work.
Right. I mean, there's 37 driveways in KMA. And so that's an additional budgetary issue for the HOA
So
to the tune of roughly $35,000, which that's a big change.
my understanding, if the driveway moved to the HOA, is that basically there'll be an additional amount push on the HOA for handling the driveway.
Yes.
But basically it'll be charged by the minute the same way as current. I mean, we would just use the big polygons.
We would use the 2 big KMA polygons, correct. And that way, it's there.
That's the only way to make it
We know
accurate.
those are accurate, plus or minus 2.5%. It's decimal dust. Yeah.
But
You
all
might
these
just look at
things
that.
need to be discussed if we are going to do it this year.
These are details, we understand. Sorry,
Yes.
Jeff.
I'm going to close off discussion on this item. We will continue this at the next board meeting. We'll have a plan for discussion, a preliminary plan, and I expect you'll probably be here. So let me ask the board, does anyone need to take a break? With not, then we'll move on to item 8G, prioritization of of utilities and services. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
No, we'll just kick it off. So this goes to the prioritization issue we talked about. I just thought it'd be important for the board and the community to understand what our utility services are up against when we keep using their staff. So with that, I'll let Brandy and Derek take it away.
Before Derek starts, I would just like to make a comment. I've heard a lot of people saying that the service has been better recently. At least a partial reason for that is because we're using a lot of utility staff that we were not using previously because we were trying to keep up on our utility services. So Derek's going to go through how this affects water, wastewater, and then I'll touch on electric propane so that we can just see what other things we're deferring on to put these additional staff to our contract snow removal. And this is for
Okay. Good morning. Staffing seems to be the big theme today, and we're going to touch on that. I want to detail the challenges presented to my department during winter months and snowstorm events when all available staff are used from my department for snow removal operations. In addition to myself, I currently have 2 operators assigned to my staff after the departure of a third last fall. But technically that's the case, but in reality there's just 2 of us. As Spencer Patterson is pulled into snow removal pretty much the whole season. He's a really experienced operator, and snow removal conditions have existed pretty much the whole year. Generally, 2 operators per day are scheduled to handle water, wastewater, and solid waste operations and a wide variety of administrative tasks. In past years, all staff were removed from the wastewater treatment plant for snow removal operations. Thankfully, our new general manager has not allowed this to occur. So in past years, myself would be pulled into snow removal, so there would be nobody running water, wastewater, and solid waste operations, and that's a significant amount of activity that we conduct as a district. However, due to snow removal needs, one operator is often tasked with maintaining all operations for water, wastewater, and solid waste. This comes at a time when extra staff is most critically needed in the department. The sole operator in my department is severely taxed during a snow removal event, as normal operations must be maintained in addition to removing snow from water, wastewater, and solid waste facilities by hand. Routine preventative maintenance typically is the first activity that is deferred during snowstorms when staffing is minimal. The life of a pump, blower, or control valve can be shortened significantly when staffing is minimal. If scheduled routine maintenance is missed, these systems can be in peril. Many other important duties often fail to be completed during these times. Filing of reports to various state agencies required by our water and wastewater permits can also be delayed, and deadlines might be missed due to departmental shortfalls caused by storms. These staffing deficiencies can lead to permit violations, which have a financial consequence to the district. A worst-case scenario would be a critical failure of our ability to treat wastewater, which would lead to a shutdown of the resort and an evacuation of the community. And you can see this is my other operator who is involved with doing hand snow removal around the treatment facility. This is our fuel island, and that's Brandon Brusesi, who is also a sole operator during times of snow removal conditions when those exist, which is pretty much this year, a very, very heavy year all the time. I would say he's a sole operator, scheduled sole operator, when Spencer's in snow removal 2 days a week, and that condition exists for myself 2 days a week, and then we work together 3 days a week, unless I get pulled into snow removal, which has happened earlier in the season. Hasn't really happened that much this year because we have staffed up more, and equipment's been an issue as well. I usually, at times, I'll volunteer and ask, can I come around wastewater treatment plant and clear some of our facilities to keep you guys free to do the associations, and there simply hasn't been equipment available for me to help them out with that. Managing a wastewater treatment facility is a complex, hands-on endeavor. Our treatment facility combines the advanced wastewater treatment techniques of activated sludge combined with state-of-the-art membrane technology. The superintendent and operators are not simply attendants, but extremely involved technicians who manage a complex and diverse microorganism community, along with high-tech equipment, including the membrane bioreactors, which represent a significant financial investment on the part of the community and the district. This is our bar screen, and I'll get to that in a second. Close attention must be paid to this operation as it requires constant process adjustments determined by lab work and observation in order to provide for the proper treatment of wastewater. These interwoven systems require constant care and attention under optimal operating conditions. And I'd like to stress the word optimal. As you know, most of this equipment and systems are at the end or nearing the end of their useful lives. This creates additional labor demands on the department as various pumps, control valves, and other equipment are in a state of fault, intermittent operation, or simply band-aided or limping along to treat and process wastewater. For example, our grip screening device, the HiCore, is out of service with the backup bar screen, as you see here, operating in the interim. This piece of equipment is highly labor-intensive, messy, and can flood if left unattended. Operators must hose down the screen and rake the debris off the screen, and if that gets neglected because we're pulled into other areas, this is the result. That grip bin fills up with water, overflows, and spills into the room. And you see, if you want to play it again, Eric, I'll point out that there's some debris on the floor that can threaten to spill outside of the wastewater treatment plant. So if we can keep this contained within the footprint of the plant, that's great. That's not a spill in my mind. But if it overflows the drain, it can go out the back door, and there's a storm drain adjacent to this facility in the yard that's about 25 feet from the door, which would imperil the meadow and Kirkwood Creek, and we would have to report that as a spill. We came close a couple of times. We were able to, if you want to play it one more time, indulge me here. You can see there's a great deal of debris here on the floor, and there's some spill containment sandbags. We were able to keep it inside the footprint of the plant, so we avoided a spill there. But this was caused because we were short-staffed and being pulled in a million different directions, trying to do hand snow removal around our facilities and the dumpsters and whatnot. So this bar screen is currently in operation right now until we get our HiCore back online. The spiral assembly is, I'll keep this short, I'm sorry. The spiral assembly is being fabricated as we speak and should be here next week, but it's going to take us a bit of time to get it back online. And staff. I'm going to have to pull our mechanic away from snow removal to actually complete this, or we're going to have to contract with an outside mechanic. And this is just one of the many mechanical control system issues that we're dealing with in wastewater. Snowstorm adds to these challenges immensely. Recently, a snowstorm turned to rain in February and flooded the plant from the outside because no staff was available to remove snow from the yard there. Flooding inside the plant can lead to multiple systems failures. So we had to sandbag the front door at one point. There was water running down the hallway of the wastewater treatment plant, threatening to come into my office where all the control systems are. So we narrowly avoided a flood there, went into the blower room where we have control panels, a variety of control panels that are, if they get wet, obviously the whole plant's going to go down. Luckily, the rain stopped after, I would say it was about a half-day rain event, but if it would have kept going, we would have been looking at some serious trouble there. In early February, due to a polymer feed pump problem, we had a minor exceedance for phosphorus. And this was a failure on the part of staff to detect it because there was a shortfall in staffing. Fortunately, I was able to partially restore this pump to normal operations, and the phosphorus removal process was reestablished, and we avoided a permit violation. But that's one of the things, if staff isn't watching these pumps constantly, a pump goes down, we lose that treatment process capability for a brief amount of time. It can cause the process to be upset, and we lose one of our capabilities is phosphorus removal. And that's what happened there. If you want to switch over to the next slide. This is well 2. I'm sure you're familiar with this building. It's right next to the rec center, KCA rec center, and it's fairly buried. I'm going to talk about water treatment. That's well 3. Top of this building is about 15 feet up. It's pretty buried. The door is right down there. It's lower 7 parking. And then well 4-5, that's the A-frame. It's on the, that's off of Hawkweed. And right next to the cross-country ski trail, the peak of that A-frame is about 20 feet up, so you can see it's a bit of a dig to get down to that door. These are our water wells. Our water treatment facilities, while less complex, also require a great deal of operator attention. Water tanks must be monitored to assure that sufficient water is available to meet customer demand and additionally to provide for fire protection. Pumping and treatment facilities must be monitored to ensure that disinfection standards for treatment are being met to protect public health and safety, but also to guarantee that the water we deliver meets our high-quality standards. And aquifer levels must be monitored continually to ensure their health and viability remain intact. During winter months, fire hydrants must be dug out and kept accessible for fire protection. Simply reaching the wells, and this previous pictures demonstrates that, can be a time-consuming and exhausting affair. Most importantly, we are required to sample drinking water for the presence of coliform on a weekly basis. Fire hydrants must be kept accessible to complete this permit-required task. Not only must the sole operator complete the sample, but often that person is responsible for digging out a hydrant like this, and that's hydrant 19 in zone 4, I believe, at the same day of the sample. And with staffing limitations, I try to get the fire hydrants dug out prior to the Tuesday sample, but sometimes it's simply not able to be done just because of the needs in snow removal. Also, we conduct quarterly monitoring well samples at 8 monitoring wells located in the meadow. The task of clearing these monitoring wells occurs every 3 months on a quarterly basis. There are 8 of them out there, and as you know, the meadow gets hammered with snow pretty good, and it requires a ton of staff typically and a lot of man hours to get these monitoring wells cleared out. It's not a 1 or 2 person job. It's typically a 3 or 4 person job over the course of 2 days, and I usually draw from other departments to help me with that task. This is a little bit of a stressor. In January, we're getting hammered with snow. There's nobody available to dig out the monitoring wells because they're all in snow removal. And I typically draw from snow removal staff to do this. So we have to push this task back. But the problem with pushing it back is that we have permitted deadlines to meet. On a quarterly basis, we have these deadlines to meet. So we're kind of pushing back and forth between snow removal staffing, getting the monitoring wells cleared, and their needs as well. So we got it just in under the wire, but I'm looking at April now and trying to figure out when are we going to schedule the April monitoring well sample, when are we going to get these dug out, and I can imagine, I haven't even seen what they look like out there. Someone who cross-country skis could probably tell me. Finally, the solid waste enterprise is perhaps one of the efforts that the district undertakes that is the most visible to the public on a daily basis. Solid waste is highly labor intensive, and its proper maintenance is critical to protecting public health and safety. This endeavor is particularly time consuming during winter months, when dumpsters must be continually shoveled out and rotated. Clearing snow from dumpsters during a big storm can easily consume a half a day. This is the dumpster up at the Towers at 7800 Club. The one on the left is dedicated to the Towers homeowners. It took me about an hour to dig that dumpster out, and that's just one of many dumpsters that we dig out and and keep cleared. You have to keep the tops of the dumpsters clear of snow, or the customer can't actually lift the lid to throw their trash away. So as you can see, during a big storm, that easily the sole operator can spend a huge part of their day just doing that and not even being at the wastewater treatment plant to clean the bar screen. And there are times when you just go, okay, well, I can't run wells today because I don't have time or staff to run wells. Well, then you're balancing all those priorities and trying to juggle all these things at the same time. The customer needs come first, and obviously with solid waste, at times that solid waste takes priority over water wastewater. Just because that's something that the customer is an immediate need of the customer when they have garbage piling up. I don't want them to have garbage piling up in their house and not have the ability to get to a dumpster. In addition to all the normal daily operational duties, operators must respond to customer service requests as well, which are dispatched from administrative staff, such as water leaks and other emergencies or interruption water services. That will pull the sole operator away from all the previously mentioned critical duties. So in the middle of doing all this running around, shoveling up dumpsters, trying to get into wells, checking the chemical feed pumps, going back and do the bar screen, making sure the centrifuge is running, making sure there's nothing going on of failures at the plant, you're going to get a call from Jesse or Kathy or Amy or Brandy or anybody else saying, hey, customer's calling, they don't have water at their house, so you're going to be pulled from that. If it's a big emergency, there are times when snow removal simply is going to come in and help me. And that has happened where we've had failures at the plant or flooded the plant. The entire snow removal staff came and pitched in to help me with a flood that we had due to torrential rains last winter. So we all work together during emergencies. And like I said, our staff is pulled into snow removal. These are simply not operations that can endure neglect. Public health and safety can be jeopardized if any of these critical operations experience even a minor failure. Additionally, if I willingly neglect my duties, I risk losing my certifications and licenses as a superintendent. However, because snow removal contracts for roads and driveways are given a higher priority than utility operations, a sole operator for my department is often required to make very difficult decisions as to which critical functions will not be completed during the storm. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
More staffing is, I think.
Snow removal staff.
Yeah. So I would have Spencer Patterson back in my world full time.
Okay. Thanks.
That would help me a great deal.
But you're saying it goes both ways.
Yeah, I get into a trackless myself from time to time. It's not uncommon. And I do have a lot of seat time. Before I was superintendent, during snow removal season, I was in a piece of equipment the whole season, and I didn't really even know what was going on in water, wastewater, or solid waste, to be honest with you.
So if the board is ready, I'll cover similar topics for electric propane. Just like water, wastewater, the district has 3 electric and propane operators, and these operators are responsible for all of the electric and propane operations in the valley. Propane tanks, deliveries, the propane vaporizers, and keeping pressure in the system, the propane piping distribution system to all of the residences, all of the propane meters. Then electric, we also have the electric out valley line, all of the transformers and substations that are associated with that. The powerhouse, which is our emergency backup generation facility, and all of the associated equipment there at the powerhouse. The distribution system for electric, all of the transformers and the meters. And also, as you can see in this picture, general safety of the public around our facilities. This is the bank behind the powerhouse, and people from Chair 2 ski off this bank. So we have to keep a rope line up so that people don't ski off and get hurt. We also maintain rope lines around some of our bigger transformers that heat up and melt out and cause hazards that people can fall into. So 3 people are responsible for all of this and any emergency response that might come up throughout the winter, be it propane or electric. So what we do in the winter is we schedule our 3 people with staggered days off, with the ideal hope that 2 people are on every day to deal with these things. Now, 2 people is critical in electric and propane because you can't do any hot work with a single operator. You have to have 2. So 2 of our people were very lucky. They live here on the mountain. And unluckily, perhaps for us, they're also trained snow removal operators. The third, that lives off the mountain, is not trained as a snow removal operator. So when we pull our utility staff into snow removal for electric propane, that means that the 2 people that live here are in snow removal. That leaves 1 operator to do all of these activities, and he regularly gets snowed off the mountain. This week was the first time he had worked a full week since January. So I'd like to go over what operations in electric propane looks like when we have 1 operator or no operators, and what we're deferring on that's really potentially going to cause us problems. So if we start with propane, since it's literally the most likely to blow up on us. So as you recall, 2 summers ago, we spent a significant amount of time clearing out the propane yard, making a road around our propane tanks. We graded it out. We made it big enough for a loader to go through there with the idea that a loader would go through there and make room for our operators to shovel the snow out so that the tanks and the valves wouldn't get buried. This doesn't work when we don't have staff. So this is the beginning of February, and this was before it really started snowing a whole lot. As you can see up here, the top arrow, that's the tank gauge. It's probably 12 feet in the air. We have to read these tank gauges every day on both tanks so that we can make sure our tanks are balanced. And as you know, we have an issue with the tanks balancing right now. So we have to manually balance the tanks using the valves that you can see are kind of on the lower part. You can't quite see them yet. But we have to get to this every day because if either of our tanks gets below 20%, we run the risk of not having sufficient pressure in our propane system to get propane to the houses, and people don't have heat. So you might be wondering how we get to these valves. This is how we get to these valves. We dig a tunnel to the valves in the snowbank, and you slide down feet first generally because that's easier. You get under the tanks, you operate the valves, and then you crawl back out. Now, I got to show you a picture of me doing this because if our single operator is snowed off the mountain and everybody else is in snow removal, I get to do this, or Rick gets to do this. Somebody has to do this. It's critical that these things happen. You can see here, this is a shot, a more recent shot. These are the tanks now, and the valves, and the how you access this infrastructure right now. So from March 5th, we have a snow stake showing where the gauge is so we can get to it, because we have to get to it. And it's just getting buried because we haven't had people or equipment to do the necessary snow removal to make this thing a more reasonable operation in the winter. So we currently have 2 snow tunnels dug, and as you can see, they're becoming longer snow tunnels. There's cornice off the tanks. But our staff, 1 single person, has to get in here every day. And personally, I don't like to send people into here, especially by themselves. It's not a very comforting feeling to say, hey, operator, go crawl in this hole and do these things that we have to do. But, you know, these valves have to be gotten to. Another propane issue. The same time we did the propane road, we dug back the bank by the vaporizers, and we paved it so that we could get a trackless in there for the same reason, because we want to be able to shovel the snow somewhere else and have a machine remove it. Behind the vaporizers, we've got the regulators that run the propane system pressure for the whole system and a lot of critical valves. We also have a liquid line back there that goes into these vaporizers, and that liquid line is a bigger danger if it ruptures. Liquid propane escaping into the atmosphere is a lot more serious than vapor. We haven't been able to keep up with it. So we've got a cornice, just like we've had in years past, building over these critical pipes, these critical regulators, just for lack of having snow removal staff and equipment to get the snow out, and our electric propane staff and equipment to be able to shovel it. Another propane issue is periodic propane patrols that we do out in the valley. You've probably seen our notices to customers to go dig out your propane meter. It's critical, you have to do this. Generally, we schedule a propane patrol, and we would send our operators out to walk the whole line, the whole valley, to see, if we know everything's buried, but maybe some areas are worse than others, maybe something's critical. I've had this on my we need to do this list since January 10th, and I have not had people to complete it. So this is actually our propane meter right here at this building. And we've had our staff, electric propane, when available, to dig this out. Rick actually had to dig it out last week.
And Rick and I did it 2 weeks before.
There we go. So we are having trouble keeping up on our own critical maintenance because we just don't have the people to deal with this amount of snow and do snow removal full time. And we certainly know that out there in the valley more issues like this exist. Okay, so enough doom and gloom. If we move on to electric, we've got similar problems. They are less potentially explosive. So during storms, we have times where staff simply doesn't go to the powerhouse because propane really is generally more important in a storm. So you get feet and feet of snow piled up by the powerhouse, which would slow us significantly from getting into the powerhouse to start generators if we had a power outage during a storm, which is likely. That's when power outages happen. It also means that our tanks up there, our ammonia tank and our diesel tanks, 2 diesel tanks, are buried, inaccessible, and the shutoff valves that we would need to get to in case there was some sort of problem with these are buried. We did have a chance, I believe it was last week, to take a backhoe and 2 operators over there and dig on these tanks for about a day, and this is where we got. This is still significant effort required to get to our shutoff valves for these tanks. And possibly more critical is the back of the powerhouse. When snow removal is focusing solely on contracts and roads, and we don't have any internal staff or any equipment to get the district snow removal done, we end up with a situation like this behind the powerhouse. It's just a snowbank, and our radiators are buried in there. And I know that we're all aware that if the generators need to come on, our radiators have to spin, and if they don't spin, those generators will overheat and shut down immediately. So once snow removal they have a minute, and we have staff, and we are able to get back here, they can do a significant improvement to our situation. But they can only do so much. The big equipment can only get so close to our electric infrastructure before you just have to hand shovel. So once snow removal spends half a day getting back there to do the snow removal required to get our people back there, then we have a couple days of digging before we can get to a situation where we think the radiators might spin in an emergency. Now this second picture on the right here, I know you can see the big snowbank that still exists over there. Under that snowbank, we've got all of our coolant pipes that go to and from the radiators, and we've got the electrical shutoffs that run the radiators. Now we feel optimistic that those radiators would spin and would not have any problems if we needed to run them. But we don't know that, and we don't have the people to dig that out and just make sure that, we don't have a coolant leak back there. We don't have something going on that we can't see behind the scenes. So in closing here, I just want to mention that our operators, the electric and propane ones particularly, have expressed to me that it's frustrating for them to get pulled into snow removal when they know the whole time they're doing snow removal that their main area of responsibility is just getting buried. And not only do they have to do snow removal for 12-hour shifts on their days off sometimes, multiple shifts at a time, but they know that when they come back from all that and they get their heads above water, they're going to have to dig out all of the stuff that's been neglected for the duration of the storms, or in February, the duration of February. So, you know, we do have a great crew who's willing to do whatever we need them to do, but it is essential that we try to pull back some people so that they can make inroads and keep this infrastructure safe for everybody.
So, Randy, sort of same question. I mean, I think what I'm hearing, I just want to make sure I'm hearing correctly, that if the snow removal operations had the resources they needed independent of the utility operations, then you would have the personnel needed to do what needs to be done.
That is correct, Eric, but I would like to add that traditionally the thought was, and it never came to fruition, but we always budgeted for a trackless for district operations that then our utility staff would use. And so not only do we need the snow removal to be fully staffed, we need to have equipment available to our staff.
Right. Got it.
And housing to put them in.
And housing
And
to
housing
put them
to
in.
put them in.
There's none.
Yes,
There's
agreed.
two housing for everything.
Yes, sir.
Another question on the propane.
Mm-hmm.
You ever consider just an enclosure over those meters?
Over the ones with the vaporizer?
Yeah, that whole thing you have to dig and tunnel into. I mean, it seems to me we can staff up snow removal crews and everything else, but we're fighting a losing battle. What we need to do is protect those meters and things from the snow coming directly on them. We can dig out around the enclosure much easier than we can dig into those pipes.
Agreed, and we have looked at that in the past, and it was an issue with how much engineering had to go into it and the cost that was going to be associated with that because of the explosive nature. But in our budget talks this year, we have that back on the table. It's something we're going to look into.
It has to be done.
Well,
You can put a shed over it.
No,
we talked about it.
yeah, I understand, but we're in this for a long time. I mean, this is not something that's just a this year problem. It's every year. So I think
And
we
we need
need.
another tank.
Yeah, I mean, it's. And the other thing, it seems to me that when we talk about snow removal crew, the snow removal crew could be expanded to do all these things. So you're not taking from your staff. You still have to take and do some things, but the snow removal crew has multiple responsibilities, and it's remove snow from those key places that we need snow removed, from the contracts, from our own facilities. So I think as we're looking at this turnaround plan, we might consider, our total need for snow removal as an organization.
List is getting longer.
No one said the mountains were cheap.
Hey, how's the resort doing on labor this year? Do you know? And, they're usually short, right? Anecdotally, I think they've done a better job opening up the mountain, but are they complaining, or you just don't know?
I haven't actually been in contact with them.
Tom was complaining early on in the season. I think at this point, I know all their housing is full here, and they're busing people from South Lake, but I haven't heard him complain in the last month about staffing. So early on through January, they were stressed, but I think maybe now they might be right-sized.
That's why half the cross-country ski trails are on. I don't want to elaborate on any of that because it's not my business anymore, but yeah, they're stressed. There's a labor shortage in in the western states and in the United States, and it's starting to hit home. That hits us hardest because we're the hardest, the least popular place for a person to come and find a job. It takes a very specific type of person to live here and deal with the hardships or commute. Just commuting here is a hardship. And that's always going to be our biggest challenge is labor. I mean, that's my opinion.
And I would add that there is a big shortage of water wastewater treatment plant operators who are certified. It's a challenge that is being seen around the state of California by all utilities. And right now, I'm the only certified operator on staff here at the district. Brandon Bersesi and Spencer Patterson are taking tests next Saturday, a week from today. And I'm very confident they're going to, if they can get out. Well, we'll get them out.
Peter, at the Economic Development meeting back in October, Caltrans during that meeting indicated that they were concerned about their labor.
Oh, sure. That's one of the reasons the spur's been closed so much.
Right. They were concerned, where were they going to get all those bodies? And I remember the question was asked of Tom, you know, what is your take so far? So the red flag was put up early on that there is finding bodies is difficult, and with the unemployment rate going down, it's even getting more and more difficult. So it's just, the district has to figure out how to solve it.
Any other?
So just one other thing with the turnaround plan that Standish had is indicated the issue of training and how that's dealt with obviously needs to be part of the staffing exercise. And although it probably wouldn't work, in previous years when we've had low snow years, we've had operators who will go to another state. They'll go to Oregon or they'll go to Washington State. Some operators, I know in other locations, have provided some sort of stipend or minimum amount to keep those operators accessible. So when we do the staffing and training exercise, maybe you can look at the idea of providing something that will allow your temporary operators to not disappear and go to another state.
We
in
do.
Those low years.
We do have that right now. Currently, we will give Nate in particular a housing credit, even though he's not on staff at the district. He gets a housing credit to stay in housing through the summer. So we offer that. That's one of the things that we had attempted to do to try to get people to stay here. We've thought about that in the past, and Nate's currently still getting that stipend through the summer.
Thanks, Kelly.
Anybody else have anything to add on this agenda item? Thank you.
Thank you.
Both of you. We'll move on to item number 9, General Manager's Report.
I've always been a strong believer in the philosophy the mind can comprehend what the butt can endure, so I'm going to go fast. Out of area electric service, we're continuing to work with Caltrans. They are upping their game relative to PG&E. PG&E has indicated recently, after 4 years of one way, that they are willing to let us serve them directly, which would include an expansion of our service area through CEC and the respective county LAFCOs, mostly Amador County in this case, or through the LAFCO process. So, more recently, Bear Valley, who is under a cease and desist for the use of their generators, has come back to us, which they nosed around many years ago. I can't remember how 3-4 years ago they nosed around. And their attorney called us and said, what do we need to do? And we said, you need to call Caltrans and tag team this issue. And so they're now working with Caltrans to, leverage both of their positions to possibly come in to help us expand our service area. So we're waiting to see what they wish to do. It's cost prohibitive for them to get service from PG&E from their perspective because of what PG&E is willing to do and what we're willing to do relative to Cal ISO and what Cal ISO is willing to do. So I'm glad Bear's now nosing around. We may see some traction on this and maybe some move forward.
Bear Valley or River?
Bear River. Sorry, Bear Valley's the other way. That's Terry's way. Bear River Resort. Yeah, sorry.
Bear River is a valley and
Bear River Resort. Bob, did you have a question?
It can wait till, well, just my curiosity, for Bear River at least, there is a PG&E, distribution line that goes near them. That still doesn't work for them?
No, they've hit a stone wall with PG&E.
Okay. Well, this is great.
They were dealing with
opportunity for us.
Tannenbaum, if that tells you anything.
Oh, my gosh.
He did, but that's who they were dealing with. So they got
actually, you've answered my question.
Okay. Fire funding RFP, we talked about that already. The CAT 950 loader, we cut the check on Friday, so that is now paid off and owned by the district. And we will have the first draft of the employee handbook, the new using the California Special Districts Association template, ready for personnel committee review in March. So we're making some progress on that. So just wanted to bring the rest of the board up to speed on that, and let's see if Rick can go as fast as I did.
As you're looking at your employee handbook and you're dealing with an employee issue and you've got these temporary employees that you're going to be bringing on, perhaps maybe there are benefits that you could expand versus what perhaps you already have. I don't know.
Clearly, we need incentives to attract people here.
Right. And to keep them.
Although I have to, I'm amazed that a snow shoveler gets $55 an hour currently.
Oh, yeah.
That's the going rate,
Yeah.
Roof shovelers,
75.
So,
And roof shovelers are even more than that.
110.
Yeah.
It's labor shortage, supply and demand.
Rick?
Well, if you're ready, this is the Cornice, Bubs, whatever it was called before that. Just an example of extreme snow. And actually, they were just out of picture here. They're working to get to that door, but that's something that the fire department, have been addressing. And we actually, unfortunately, had to close the building due to access. This is the fire riser room. We had an automatic alarm. Couldn't get to the alarm panel because it was under, a man door, essentially 6 feet of snow. We were able to get in there, figure out the alarm, but again, I unfortunately had to shut a building down for 2.5 days. They have since corrected the problem, but I am actively looking at all the properties here at Kirkwood and encourage homeowners to look at their properties as well, just to make sure we have good emergency access in and out. In my example, when the person said, well, no, I can get out of that door, it's okay. I said, well, what if I have to carry you out? What if it's your grandmother, your grandfather having to get out of there, your small child, and if I got to carry hoses to get in there. So, again, just safety as a reminder for the community. Back to propane briefly. As we discussed in previous board meetings, we had a motor issue in one of our vaporizers, the one on the right side, the green one. That's been since corrected as of this week, and so we have the redundancy back with our vaporizers for our propane system. And then finally, we do have critters out there. There's a coyote on top of our dumpster by the wastewater treatment plant, and he was having lunch.
We'd hire anyone at this point.
So, again, just to remind the community, try to keep the lids secured with the chains. There are chains and clasps on the lids, but don't be surprised if you see a head pop out of a dumpster, whether it's a raccoon, coyote, and spring and fall we'll see the bear. So, and that concludes my really fast report.
I like the fast report.
Any questions of Rick? Thank you, Rick. Moving on to the standing committee reports, planning.
There's several significant ones, but I'm going to go briefly on them because we don't have time. But one is we had a planning committee meeting yesterday morning. Then we had a follow-up meeting with Tom Fortune and Brian Bigley yesterday afternoon. Eric, Bob, and I. We talked about opportunity zone, possibly using opportunity zone as a mechanism for building employee housing and possibly some other kinds of mixed uses to make it more attractive to a developer. There is interest, and I think maybe some progress on this. The sincerity of that interest will be made by maybe May after the snow season. This is a topic which we could discuss in greater detail if it were on our agenda. We had a long discussion about heat pumps. This is Bob's idea. Bob has submitted an application to UC Berkeley to gain services of an intern or to do studies on the feasibility of electric heat pumps for larger buildings and for snowmelt systems as a way to get off of propane. There is a move now to basically restrict use of propane and natural gas, or I mean, just like with electricity has been. So we want to get out ahead of that. The Vail is very, very interested in this one, I would say. And we also have candidate buildings for the study should we be successful in getting the intern. This is big thanks to Bob. This is Bob's big effort, actually, on both those topics.
I just want to mention on the snow melt, I thought as a way of dealing with these huge mounds, or if you look at the back of the radiators there, if there were a snow melt system that was cost effective, that's probably the way to go. And so the one advantage of a heat pump is it's highly efficient, and you don't need as quick a temperature change if all you're doing is melting snow as opposed to warming people. So I thought that was a particularly attractive idea that Brian had brought up.
Yeah, Bill would be very interested in that possibility. A third topic is inverse condemnation under two circumstances. One is what's the case study for our overhead line, 1.3 miles of overhead line through the forest? Are we in the same boat as PG&E or not? The second is, of course, our utility lines that we do not own, but that cross private property. But are we still subject to inverse condemnation on that score, as with the NOIA lawsuit? So we've asked for, and I think Eric already has in process, getting us a good briefing from Dick Shanahan and possibly others, so that we really have a thorough understanding as a board on what our liabilities and risks are associated with inverse condemnation. And then finally, we discussed a letter to Caltrans to discuss how we can either help them, but certainly express our concerns about the frequent closures this year. This is something that Eric and Tom Fortune are going to pursue, ultimately go to our county supervisors in hopes of support, and then to our state legislatures as well, and hopefully be able to do something in time for the state budget cycle, which is rapidly approaching, and Bob is going to do a little research on that.
What is inverse condemnation?
It's basically the claim that a public entity has taken a property without going through the eminent domain procedure.
It's that you have automatic liability no matter what. To give you probably the most ridiculous, but opposing counsel in the NOIA case said, yes, you would be liable. If you decided to stand on the propane piping upstream of the meter to paint your eaves and you broke it, the district would be liable. That's what inverse condemnation means.
But we don't
absolute
know
liability.
But we don't know if that applies to us. So
correct.
What we want is a good briefing with case studies, sites, et cetera, the theories, et cetera.
Yeah.
So we really have a thorough understanding of these issues, both for the case where we have an electric line over in public property along an easement, as well as our utilities, whether it's water or propane or whatever, on private property.
So Eric, I don't know, a number of years ago, maybe even last year too, Howard Hoffman was always advocating for I would call it a tunnel over on the spur, and, maybe the time has come. So I don't know how you would advocate for something like that, but for years he's been saying that's what's needed over on the spur side.
Well, actually, it would help the whole regions because 80 closed pretty quickly, 88 closed, and everyone tried to go through 50, and it just jammed back. So I think there is an argument to say that it would actually improve the economic status of the whole tower area, not only...
Well, we would, that's not the PUD's territory, but we as a community, we should certainly support that idea, and hopefully the counties would, but ultimately it's Caltrans and the state legislature budgeting for that kind of a thing.
It's actually the feds play into that. Highway 88 is the southernmost highway with the Department of Defense jurisdiction across it because there's only one overpass, and that's the railroad in Ione, and they can go around. So DOD would never allow a snow tunnel so they can get their missiles and equipment back and forth.
The big question there, I don't want to...
That's not so clear, actually. There is some discussion on that, and you need to do it in a way that DOD need to be a partner in the problem.
But it's also an oversize. I mean, it's not just DOD. It is the only over the hill with no bridges. So it's oversized equipment anytime from cranes to anything else that uses a use permit to get over top of the Sierras. It's only one of the only ones in Northern California.
A lot of boats, otherwise you got to go to Quincy, I think.
That's it.
Operations?
I think we pretty much covered everything, didn't we, Standish? Do you have anything you
Wasn't that the last meeting?
Yeah.
Finance?
Finance, the only thing we haven't covered is we are, as a committee, working on drafting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 policies, like reserve guidelines, local debt policy, investment policy, reimbursement policy. These are items that Eric came to us and said, we really don't have these, we need them. So we're in the process of drafting in hopes that we have something to bring to the board when in June or so. That's it.
IT, Bob?
Nothing additional to report.
Personnel Committee, I think we covered everything today. Anything on your ad hoc committee?
Well, this is we're doing two things. I mean, the ad hoc committee has not met, but we're pursuing the two things, the tax and merger.
Right. General discussion, board members. Anything you want to bring up?
The other thing that you and I talked about, Jeff.
Yes, we do have, for the 4th of July weekend, it's been suggested and maybe even requested that we move the board meeting, rather than having staff working the entire weekend supporting the picnic and board meetings and everything, that we hold our board meeting maybe early Friday evening, when a lot of residents could be here.
That'd be the 5th?
I think
Yes,
the
that would be the
5th this year. It's not something we necessarily need to decide today, but
By me.
I'm good with it.
Standish?
Sure. So move it to the
It
5th.
works for
whatever
me, too.
time you decide.
And I'd like to get input, since I at least have one HOA here, and actually 2 HOAs, and Frank, I know you have a lot of meetings going on, especially KMA has a bunch of councils going on. Would like 4 o'clock Friday not conflict with KMA or Lost Cabins or any of the HOAs you deal with, Frank? Is that... I'm trying to make it late enough that the people are here, but early enough that I'm not keeping staff till midnight.
We have a meeting that starts at 3 o'clock on that Friday.
Would 5 be better then?
3 to 6. We could move it a little earlier if we have space for that. But it's usually going to be 3 hours.
Could we maybe move you to 2 to 5, and then we'll go 5? That way your people can be, with 5 o'clock work for the board, and that way, and if you go 2 to 5, then we could just do them back to back.
Are you serving cocktails?
I will buy you a cocktail after the meeting, Judy, and you can count on that.
We're actually serving snow cones.
Well, I won't serve it in the PUD, but I'll take you out for a cocktail, absolutely.
We could move a little earlier if that would work.
So 5 o'clock then Friday? Just is that
I think that would work for the board.
Yeah.
So if
staff
you
very
don't-
much appreciates that. I will relay that to them quickly.
Great.
They're a little threadbare right now.
Very good. If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.